the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
It's 3 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and we're going in with this major breaking ongoing incident. Reports of a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital. Armed police are on the scene, casualties unknown. We will have up to the minute latest details on that as we get it. Stay tuned. In terms of other breaking news though, could an SOS signal have been detected now from somewhere near the wreck of the Titanic? This would mean that potentially those people on board that sunken craft are alive, but get this, could the US government be blocking a rescue team from Britain from saving those people on board? I'll tell you the latest on all of that. Also a big inflation shock. Yes, OK, so inflation has remained at the same level, but what does this really mean for the money in your pocket? Is it time for a recession? I'm going to be talking about this as well, of course. Yes, that's right. Could we well now be about to be paying the EU more money to protect our own borders? You will not believe this. Is this really the grand plan from Rishi Sunak and co to lob a load more money to the European Union and just hope that that will stop the small boats? It's not worked for the French, has it? I'll fill you in on the finer points very shortly and get a load of this as well. Christians are now seen as being, quote, aggressive when it comes to standing up for their religious beliefs over gender identity. Well, I'm sorry, but why are the Christians copping it more than some of the Muslim community? I'm going to be having a big discussion on all of this. Patrick Christys on GB News. Loads to go out today. We will be on the scene at this reported stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital. Like I've said, armed police are there. The amount of casualties as yet unknown. Big breaking ongoing story. Get your views coming in, though, on a whole host of those other stories, including whether or not the US government is actually blocking a British crew from being able to save the people on board that craft near the Titanic. GB Views at gbnews.com. But now it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you very much and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. As you've just been hearing, breaking news, armed police are responding to a reported stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital in West London. One man has been arrested. London Ambulance also sent a number of resources to the scene, including London's Air Ambulance. They told GB News in a statement that teams have so far treated 2 people at the scene. More on that breaking news story as we get it. GB News understands the tapping that was heard in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic Ocean is Morse code for SOS. Sources close to the rescue tell GB News the US Coast Guard decided not to fund two deep water salvage companies who could have flown equipment over on US military transport. They're understood to have been 3 to 4 days away. The vessel is 3,800 metres below sea level, and we understand that last night 2 vehicles were sent down, but both imploded at 3,000 metres. 5 people in total are missing. They may have as little as 24 hours of oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. Marine biologist Monty Halls said the banging noise could be a good sign.
These banging sounds being heard every 30 minutes. Now, that is a very clear strategy by, we would hope, the occupants of that vessel to think, right, we signal every 30 minutes there's a little burst of activity, because sound is probably the one way you can locate this submersible down there. Finding the vessel is just the start, because then you've got to get it up. The opportunity to extract the 5 people from the vessel and get them into another vessel down there is nil. That's not going to happen. So you've got to get the vessel to the surface somehow, and that's a whole new challenge.
The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations of a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed at 8.7% up until May, the same rate as in April. This comes as the UK net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May. Meanwhile, the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April. Prime Minister's questions this afternoon. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak defended the government's plans of tackling inflation despite considerable pushback from the opposition.
Amount of personal attacks and petty point scoring can disguise the fact that the honourable gentleman does not have a plan for this country, Mr. Speaker. He comes here every week to make the same petty points. We are getting on and delivering for this country. Yes, Mr. Speaker, inflation is a challenge. That's why we are on track to keep reducing it. We are reducing waiting lists. We are stopping the boats, all while he is focused on the past, focused on the politics. It's all talk, whereas from this government and from this Prime Minister, we deliver for the country.
Sure, from the vantage point of his helicopter, everything might look fine. But that's not the lived experience of those on the ground. After 13 years of economic failure across the country, people are paying the price of uncosted, reckless, damaging decisions by the Tory party. And even now, as mortgages go through the roof, the Prime Minister is planning to wave through honours and peerages for those who cause misery for millions.
Retail giants WH Smith, Marks & Spencer and Argos have been named and shamed for failing to pay the minimum wage. Almost £5 million was found to be owed to around 63,000 workers following investigations dating back as far as 2017. Named employers have been made to pay back what they owed and, in addition, were fined around £7 million. High street retailer WH Smith was the worst offender, according to HMRC, with the new figures claiming it failed to pay around £1 million to over 17,500 workers. The retailer blamed this on an error related to its company uniform policy. And the government has set out a major package of financial support for Ukraine to bolster their economic stability as it continues to push back Russian forces. The package includes a £20 million boost for insurance companies operating in Ukraine. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Bank loan guarantees, will support vital public services, including the cost of running schools and hospitals. The Prime Minister says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, we start with the big news that broke around half an hour ago and is very much ongoing. An armed police force has been dispatched after reports of a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital in northwest London. A man has been arrested. I can play you a clip now of the scene. So what you're looking at here, if you're watching us on telly, is an armed police officer. That was the first thing that you saw, running towards the hospital. This is the police urgent rapid response unit outside the hospital, police everywhere. Then what you'll see is people running out of that hospital. The reports that we're getting at the moment is that at least two people are understood to have been injured, and that patients are saying that they had to hide in safe rooms. As it currently stands, one man has been arrested. That's according to the Metropolitan Police. They say the situation is still very much ongoing. At the scene, staff, of course, and patients who can do anyway, have been urged to evacuate the hospital urgently and immediately. They are currently camping outside that hospital. The hospital is in the centre of the Park Royal Business Estate. It's the border of Brent and Ealing towards north-west London. We have a reporter en route to that scene at the moment. Any updates on that, we will give them to you as soon as we get them. But just to recap, there is an ongoing, understood to be a stabbing, potentially multiple stabbing incident taking place at a hospital at the moment. The London Ambulance Service has issued the following statement. We were called today at 1:18 p.m. to reports of an incident at Central Middlesex Hospital. We sent a number of resources to the scene, including an incident response officer. Bear in mind, this is from the ambulance service, this is not the police. An advanced paramedic, an ambulance crew, a medic in a fast response car, and a number of hazardous area response teams. We also dispatched London's air ambulance. Our teams have so far treated 2 people at the scene. The incident is still ongoing. That is the latest from the ambulance service. The police have confirmed, as I'm just getting it in front of me now, that they are still at the scene, that the armed police are still at the scene at the moment as things stand. Like I've said to you, our reporter is on the way. We are aware, this is an incident from Brent Police, we are aware of an incident at Central Middlesex Hospital in Brent. Armed officers are among those responding. A man has been arrested. More information to follow. And some eyewitness testimony that's been reported, that's out there at the moment, talks of patients receiving some kind of alarm, mass panic, fleeing the hospital, those who could, and some having to cower within panic rooms and safe rooms within that hospital. We will be at that scene very shortly for you, and we will bring you the latest updates as we get them. As I've said, it is an ongoing incident. For now, we're going to return to another big breaking story that, frankly, has been gripping the nation and the world, and that is that GB News understands from a very, very impeccable source that rescuers searching for the Titan submarine that went missing on a diving expedition to the wreck of the Titanic have heard regular tapping sounds in the form of SOS distress signals from where the vessel went missing. New reports also allege that safety fears were raised over the vessel before it went missing, and according to authorities, there is around a day's supply of oxygen left. So the clock is very much ticking. One thing that I know that is really grinding people's gears at the moment is that all this talk about how on earth is anyone going to get down there and save these people if all the indications at the moment are that they are alive? Well, the answer, unfortunately, could be sitting on a runway somewhere in Jersey, because vital rescue equipment is stuck in Jersey, in the Channel Islands, unable to make it to the United States. This is according to reports because there's some kind of hold-up with the US import delays. Bear in mind that clock is ticking, and if those people are down there alive at the moment, sending SOS signals back up to the surface, then good grief, isn't it about time that that plane took off? And the US let that plane take off as well to save those people. May I remind you as well, British nationals on board. Shouldn't they be there trying to save them? Let's just remind ourselves of where they are now. With GB News' presenter Pip Thompson, who has the very, very latest for us.
The last known sighting of the Titan sub, pictured on Sunday. But where on earth is it now? Just hours remain to find the submersible in the remoteness of the North Atlantic and bring its 5 passengers home alive to their desperate families.
With any sealed compartment, you've got a finite time in terms of oxygen, in terms of the air you're breathing, resources, etc., etc. So the mentality down there, I think everyone else on Earth can only begin to imagine, what it's like down there and what the mentality is you have to adopt.
There is still some hope for the stricken sub. GB News understands rescuers have detected SOS signals, which would indicate the vessel is still intact. Those on board include Britain's Hamish Harding, Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Suleiman. They'd paid some £200,000 each to explore the wreckage of the Titanic, lying in darkness at the bottom of the seabed. A descent of nearly 2.5 miles, the height of 9 Empire State Buildings. But serious questions are now being raised about the safety and simplicity of the OceanGate vessel. Here's a reporter on a recent CBS documentary being shown around.
We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on! And listen closely to Stockton Rush, the chief executive of OceanGate, explaining his company's approach.
When I started the business, one of the things you'll find, there are other sub-operators out there, but they typically have gentlemen who are ex-military submariners, and you'll see a whole bunch of 50-year-old white guys. So we've really tried to get very intelligent, motivated, younger individuals involved, because we're doing things that are completely new.
There are huge questions to be answered, but that is for another day. For now, the focus remains on reaching 5 stranded men, trapped in the most catastrophic of circumstances, in one of the most hostile places on Earth. Pip Thompson, GB News.
Pip joins me now. Pip, there are several ongoing questions from this. The safety of the craft initially, and why on earth, really, frankly, it was functioning in that position. I think the more pressing point is the SOS signals that have been detected. Absolutely harrowing for everybody involved, for the loved ones especially, who, it would appear now, can be relatively confident that their relatives are alive at the bottom of the ocean, potentially, and that the help that they maybe need could be stuck on a runway somewhere in Jersey and not being allowed to actually get to the scene. Lots to unpack here, but as it stands, the indications are that these people may well be alive.
That is still the hope, although that clock is ticking down now, Patrick. There's about 20 hours left now, we understand it, until that oxygen supply runs out. Now, this distress signal, it hasn't been confirmed by the US Coast Guard. He's been talking about sounds that have been heard, noise that has been detected, but they don't know the source of it. So it's still not clear what's still not clear is, did that noise come from the seabed, or is it, as everybody hopes, on the surface? I mean, that North Atlantic is so massive, isn't it? It is like looking for a needle in a haystack. But GB News sources have told us that it was a specific distress signal. We think it has been every half hour, which would indicate that there is somebody in that vessel who knows exactly what they are doing and how to, how to get help. But that clock is ticking down. You mentioned this British firm, Magellan. They are based in the Channel Islands, we understand. They say they are ready to help and have been working full-time to secure the necessary support to move their specialist equipment. But it doesn't sound like they've even taken off yet. Something does appear to be going on there with the US Coast Guard, because they have a vessel that can get down to far lower depths than a lot of the equipment that's already there. So we understand that if the submersible is on the seabed, that's some 2.5 miles down. I think I said in my piece there, the height of 9 Empire State Buildings. Their equipment can get to at least that distance down. I mean, there's already been some equipment that was sent down which imploded because it could only get 3,000 metres down. Any further than that just did not work. So that's the sort of help that is desperately needed. We're not quite sure why it hasn't reached.
We're not quite sure why it hasn't reached. And look, fingers crossed that there is another way of getting these people back up, if indeed they are alive. Like you said there, GB News sources would indicate that there has been a regular distress signal detected. The implication there, of course, being that those people are still alive and are capable, therefore, of knowing what's going on, trying to get some help for themselves. And that would make sense, because the people who are on board this, Stockton Rush, so we've got, he's the chief executive and founder of OceanGate. We've also got Paul-Henri Nargelet, who has basically been studying the Titanic for 35 years.
Known as Mr. Titanic.
Known as Mr. Titanic. And the British billionaire, of course, as well, Hamish Harding, who, interestingly, a friend of his who was due to be on this very mission, if you want to call it that, had said this guy basically has a brain the size of the planet. He will be, with all his faculties at the moment, and will be doing everything he can to try to figure out a way up.
Because let's not also forget, there is a 19-year-old lad on there.
Yes.
Suleiman Dawood, and his father Shahzada, 19 years old. You know, how do you cope in that sort of situation?
Yeah.
Luckily, most of us will never, ever know, but they need to conserve their oxygen supply if indeed they are that far down. Conditions, it's black down there. They're in a tiny, cramped space.
It's hellish, really. It is hellish, and we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the ocean bed where they are believed to be. Pip, thank you very, very much. Pip will be here with regular updates. Again, another big breaking story. I'm going to go now to Blair Thornton, who's the Professor of Marine Autonomy at Southampton University. Thank you very much for joining me at the moment. Look, as I've said, GB News sources have told us that there has been what is believed to be a distress signal detected at regular intervals, which would imply that the people on that craft at the moment, fingers crossed, are still alive. What do you make of their chances, if indeed they are all conscious, and if indeed they are with the wherewithal to be able to make some kind of distress call?
Well, the fact that there are signals coming from the seafloor, that's what we believe, does really narrow down the search space that would need to be looked at. There's many situations that could have taken place, but knowing that the vehicle, or thinking that the submersible is now on the seafloor and stationary, is a big development. It really narrows down the search area.
And also, as well, it narrows down what might have happened. This time yesterday, I had an expert on, a submariner with decades of experience, who I think very, very reasonably suggested the possibility that this thing had, you know, been breached, that there'd been some kind of explosion or crumpling, and that would have made sense given the depth that they were at, and potentially the calibre of vessel they were in as well, which we'll come on to. But actually, this would indicate that the thing is intact. If that is the case, what do you think's happened?
So, well, there's any number of things that could have happened. One possibility is that the ballast release system, which is the major emergency surfacing mechanism, has not functioned as planned, but it's really speculation at this point. I think the priority should be to narrow down the location of the submersible. So currently, as I understand, there are sonar buoys from the surface that have narrowed down the location. If we assume that the submersible is on the seafloor, that narrows it down to a search space in the region of 1 kilometre or so on the seafloor. Now, there's technologies to use multiple sonar buoys or more specialised acoustic systems to try and narrow down that further, which would make it possible to perform very targeted searches using platforms such as remotely operated vehicles.
No, indeed. And as we understand it, there is a Guernsey-based underwater research firm called Magellan, which has equipment stored at their base in Jersey, so it's all Channel Island related here at the moment. They are saying that they, we believe anyway, have the equipment that might be able to reach this vessel and to get it. And they have so far, as we believe, have been blocked from doing so. If not them, then who? Because as far as I can see, if my relatives were down there and we were getting decent intelligence that they were alive now, and there was a company with the capacity to get them to the surface and save their lives that wasn't being allowed to do so, I mean, good grief, it doesn't bear thinking about. But is there anything else that can be done?
So my understanding from looking at news media outlets is that there are remotely operated vehicles on site. The Victor 6000 from Ifremer has been mentioned that do have the ability to dive down to those depths. Now, these remotely operated vehicles, these are highly capable systems. They will have high-resolution cameras. Many will also have active acoustics and also very powerful manipulators that can be used in a very flexible way to deal with situations. One of the points about these vehicles, though, is that they are very slow to move. A remotely operated vehicle like this will typically move at the same speed a human would walk.
I'm just going to have to cut in, Blair. I hope you don't think I'm being rude. We've had a development on another breaking story, so we're going to take that now. But that was Blair Thornton, who's Professor of Marine Autonomy at Southampton University. That's on the Titanic sub-story. But yes, I have now got a development in our other big breaking story, which is that central Middlesex hospital stabbing. It's a police statement. It reads, a man has been arrested following a stabbing incident at Central Middlesex Hospital. Armed officers were among those responding after calls at 13:18 hours on Wednesday, the 21st of June, to reports that 2 people had been stabbed. Officers found 2 people with stab injuries. The first victim has injuries that are being treated as life-threatening. The second victim's injuries are not treated as life-threatening. Police arrested a man outside the hospital. He has also been conveyed to hospital, having received injuries that are believed to be self-inflicted. His condition is being treated as life-threatening. Officers will remain in the hospital as further searches are conducted, but at this time, they are satisfied that no one else is sought. Police are working to establish the circumstances. At this time, the incident is not being treated as terror-related. The hospital was temporarily locked down, but is now reopened and will be operating services as normal. There is a heightened police presence at the hospital as we investigate. So that is from the police. What they are saying is that they attended to calls of a stabbing. One person with serious life-threatening injuries is being treated. Another person with non-life-threatening injuries is being treated. The man that they believe is responsible for the stabbing has what they call self-inflicted wounds, and he is in a life-threatening condition. However, this, of course, is not being treated now as a terror incident, and they are confident that there is nobody else that they need to be looking for in relation to this incident. More as we get it. If you are watching us on TV there, what you were watching, of course, there was footage of that scene as armed police rushed into Central Middlesex Hospital. More on it as we get it. There will be big developments throughout the course of this show. So, yes, just that reminder for you, the armed police have been called to the reports of that stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital. A man has been arrested. More as we get it. But now, in a shock turn of events this morning, stubborn inflation remains at 8.7%. That is according to figures from the Office for National Statistics. How does this affect the money in your pocket? What on earth is going on? I will have the latest on that and our 2 big breaking stories in just a tick. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, well, we obviously do have a couple of big breaking news stories for you. The very first one is a reminder of what's been going on at that hospital, Central Middlesex Hospital, where a stabbing has taken place. The latest is that armed police responded, and a police statement said this: a man has been arrested following a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital. Armed officers were among those responding after calls at 13:18 hours, 18 minutes past 1 to you and I, on Wednesday, the 21st of June, to reports that 2 people had been stabbed. Officers found 2 people with stab injuries. The first victim has injuries that are being treated as life-threatening. The second victim's injuries are not being treated as life-threatening. Police arrested a man outside the hospital. He has also been conveyed to hospital, having received injuries that are believed to be self-inflicted. His condition is being treated as life-threatening, so he also has life-threatening injuries. Officers will remain in the hospital. Further searches are being carried out. They are satisfied that no one else is being sought in relation to this, and police are working to establish the circumstances and, of course, crucially, the motives, although at this time they are saying it's not being treated as terror. The hospital was locked down. It's believed to now be reopened as normal. There is a heightened police presence at the hospital. So more on this as we get it. Our reporter is on the way to the scene, and we will keep you up to date on the latest on that. But now, in a story that ordinarily, arguably, would have been leading the news agenda, to a shock turn of events this morning. Stubborn inflation remains at 8.7%, according to new figures from the Office for National Statistics. Here to run us through it is Liam Halligan with On the Money.
The UK's cost of living crisis is ongoing, and this morning, when the Office for National Statistics released the latest figures on price pressures, there was an inflation shock. Let's have a look at those numbers. Back in April, inflation was 8.7%. That means prices in general were 8.7% higher than in April 2022. Many economists expected inflation to keep coming down, and yet it stubbornly remained the same. May 2023, inflation still 8.7%. That means Britain is now an outlier across the Western world. Our inflation is the highest in the G7 group of advanced industrialised countries. There we are, 8.7% in May. In the Eurozone across the channel there, that 20-nation currency bloc, inflation's averaging just 6.1%. And in the US, it's 4%. Though in the US in particular and the Eurozone, energy prices are much cheaper than they are here in Britain. What's causing this high inflation in the UK? It's partly food price inflation. As everyone knows, who goes to do their shopping in their supermarket, grocery prices are still sky high and they're rising. In April 2023, we had 19.1% inflation. Again, food prices in general, 19.1% higher than the same month in 2022. And in May, inflation in food prices came down only slightly, 18.3%, still sky high. And on top of that, there's a technical measure that economists look at, including economists at the Bank of England, core inflation. This strips out volatile items, food, energy, other things that are imported to try and understand what's happening domestically. Wage pressures, supply chain issues being experienced by British firms, or underlying inflation or core inflation. It's not only not coming down or staying the same, it's actually going up. 6.2% in March, 6.8% in April, and 7.1% in May. And that's what's really worrying the Bank of England as they contemplate what's going to happen to interest rates. They're making that crucial decision tomorrow. It will be announced at noon. We've seen from 2017 all the way through to the end of 2021, interest rates were ultra low. Lots of households locked in 5-year, 3-year, 2-year mortgage deals. Those mortgage deals are now unwinding as interest rates have risen since late 2021, all the way up to 4.5%. Well, tomorrow we could see a rise to 4.75% by the Bank of England, or indeed a big hefty 0.5 percentage point rise all the way up to 5% as the bank tries to clamp down on inflation. This, of course, does have knock-on effects for mortgages. As those 5-, 3- and 2-year deals expire, mortgage rates are set to rise further. They're up above 6% on average, in some cases 7 or 8%. But it's good news for savers. Higher interest rates mean as long as the banks and building societies do pass those rate rises on, you will get a bit more bang for your buck. So there we have it. Britain is now the inflation nation. Price pressures are persisting. This is the story that's going to dominate politics all the way through to the next general election.
Absolutely. Look, Liam, thank you very, very much. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor with On the Money. I will have loads more on today's inflation figures and what they mean for you very, very shortly. I'm also going to be talking about the fact that this is, of course, potentially another Rishi Sunak broken promise, which is why I'm going to be floating the question about whether or not it's time for a dream ticket of Boris Johnson and, of course, the man himself, Nigel Farage. That will give the Westminster snobberati a bloody nose, wouldn't it? And get a load of this story as well. Christians, right here in Britain, are essentially being bullied over their religious views. That, interestingly, can't be said for all religions, can it? But right now, we're going to go to your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories. Well, the breaking news in this last half hour is that a man has now been arrested following a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital in West London. 2 people sustained injuries, with one victim being treated with life-threatening injuries. The suspect has been admitted to hospital, having received injuries that are believed to be self-inflicted. His condition is being treated as life-threatening. A spokesperson for the hospital trust said the hospital was temporarily locked down. People had been evacuated, but it had now reopened. We understand armed police are on the scene, but this is not being treated now as terror-related. In other news today, GB News understands the tapping that has been detected in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic is Morse code for SOS, Save Our Souls. Sources close to the rescue tell GB News the US Coast Guard decided not to fund 2 deep water salvage companies who could have flown equipment over on US military transport. They're understood to be 3 to 4 days away. The vessel's 3,800 metres below the sea level. And GB News understands that last night 2 vehicles were sent down, but both imploded at 3,000 metres. 5 people in total are still missing. They may have as little as 24 hours oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. We'll keep up to date with that story throughout the rest of the day.
These banging sounds being heard every 30 minutes. Now, that is a very clear strategy by, we would hope, the occupants of that vessel to think, right, we signal every 30 minutes there's a little burst of activity, because sound is probably the one way you can locate this submersible down there. Finding the vessel is just the start, because then you've got to get it up. The opportunity to extract the 5 people from the vessel and get them into another vessel down there is nil. That's not going to happen. So you've got to get the vessel to the surface somehow, and that's a whole new challenge.
News on the economy, and the UK's inflation rate stayed the same, despite expectations there may be a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed up at 8.7% until May. That's the same rate as April, and that comes as the UK net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May. Meanwhile, the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April. More on all those stories, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's take a closer look at those numbers for you today. The pound buying you $1.2714 and €1.1635. The price of gold, £1,514.80 an ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 7,549 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Loads of news about today. That major incident at that hospital in Middlesex. We'll bring you the latest on that. As it currently stands, 2 people stabbed, 2 injured, one in a life-threatening condition. Also, of course, the latest from that Titanic submersible as well, as SOS signals are believed to have been detected. But let's get more on today's inflation figures, because high inflation is having an impact on businesses, on people right across the country. You've heard all the stats from Liam there. You've heard all of that info. But what I wanted to do was to get out and about with Jack Carson, our West Midlands reporter, who joins us from a factory in Sutton Coalfield to actually find out what things are like at the coalface. Jack.
Well, Patrick, the main thing that I've found today is businesses concerned. Small, medium enterprise businesses are concerned. The industrial estate where this factory is on is an example of those small, medium enterprise businesses that employ millions of people across the country, and they're currently finding this high rate of inflation, the fact that it's not come down today, the possibility that interest rates could well go up, the base rate could well go up tomorrow, as judged by the Bank of England. They are finding that concerning and particularly unsustainable. Now, Jeremy Hunt, on the back of that figure this morning, said that this strengthens the case for the government to stick to his guns. But there is a worry from business here that the government aren't listening to their specific concerns. I spoke to Steve Hardiman, who's the managing director of Clevedon Fasteners here. They make fasteners, rivets that go all across the country. I spoke to him about the reality of running his business in the current economic climate.
People seem to forget we're coming off the back of the COVID crisis. Lots of people have got balance sheets that are bombed out with COVID loans and various other things. The COVID loans were taken out at 0.1%. The chances are tomorrow we might get to 5%, and that means that when you've got a loan, that might be up to 6.5%, and that's going to hurt a lot of businesses. The energy is a nightmare, because when we took out our energy contract, basically we were paying about £5,000 a month on energy. We're now paying £16,000 a month. It's just more and more taxes on businesses. It's a very, very poor environment at the moment for businesses, and that's the thing that concerns me the most.
Well, as you heard there, just how stark the contrast is. £5,000 they're paying a month for energy. Now it's up to £16,000 a month. The impact on this business is that when they were used to be open 5 days a week, they've now had to cut that down to 4 and try and cram as much productivity as they can within those 4 days, because they just don't know whether it's sustainable and they can afford that extra day of energy, a week. Now, the British Chamber of Commerce, their head of research, David Barry, has said that these figures today show that action is needed by the government, not only on labour supply but also possibly a reform of business rates. And it's the feeling here that the small and medium enterprises business on this industrial estate feel like the government isn't necessarily listening to their concerns.
Jack, thank you very much. Jack Carson there for us out and about, just getting that reaction really from the people who this properly affects. Liam is still with me in the studio right now. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. Liam, no matter which way you dress this up, it is hurtling towards another broken pledge by Rishi Sunak.
It certainly is. Rishi Sunak rather rashly promised to bring down inflation by half. When it was 10% in January, he said that, so that means 5%. Inflation really is the Bank of England's job rather than his. But look, these are serious times. I do think a lot of families are going to struggle with their mortgages. The IFS, Institute for Fiscal Studies, have tried to put some numbers on it. They think the age group that's going to suffer the most is the age group that tends to pay most as a share of their income on their mortgages, which are those in their 30s, if they're lucky enough to buy a home. Now, they may not feel so lucky in the months to come, because the IFS says that average monthly mortgage payments for those in their 30s are going to increase by £360 a month.
Yeah.
So, that's £4,000 a year, which is a big chunk of your income for anyone, but particularly if you're in your 30s. It's also worth saying, Patrick, that I don't want this to be completely alarmist. I do think a lot of the banks and building societies, when push comes to shove, they're not going to move to try and repossess houses, at least not quickly. I do think they will try and extend loans. So if you've got an increase in your mortgage payment, but you extend the loan from 25 years to, say, 35 years, that monthly payment may actually not go up by so much. If you switch for a while from a repayment mortgage to an interest-only mortgage, where you're only paying interest not on the principal of the loan, but on the interest charge, again, that can keep your monthly mortgage payment high. These are difficult times, and there are going to be a lot of people out there who are worried. But I don't think this is anything like a kind of 2007, 2008 financial crisis in the making.
Liam, look, thank you very, very much. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. But now, we've got a lot to cram in because we've had so much breaking news, but I wanted to bring this to you. Rishi Sunak is heading for a massive cabinet row, apparently, over a new border deal that would see us giving the EU money. Sunak and Suella Braverman are said to want to push through a deal with the EU that would mean that they would work with Frontex, which is the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. But some ministers have pointed out that the deal would cost us a lot of money, and they said it wouldn't do much to stop the small boats crisis. I mean, good grief, we've given the French about 500 million quid, and we have more people coming over in the last couple of days than we've had for months previously. I'm joined now by Kevin Saunders, who's a former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. Kevin, thank you very much. Why on earth are we paying foreign people who've already been letting in foreign people across the Channel to actually patrol our borders?
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one, this one. I've seen the headlines. I haven't seen much of the meat of the story. We've never been part of Frontex. Even before Brexit, we were not part of Frontex. We had a relationship with Frontex, but it was only, it wasn't full membership or anything like that. And we have actually deployed cutters to the Mediterranean to help them out. Because really the Mediterranean is the front line. If we can stop the migrants getting into Europe, we should be able to see the numbers reduced attempting to get to the UK. But I don't actually know what the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary are hoping to get out of this deal.
Well, I'm not sure what they're playing at either, to be honest with you, Kevin, because the answer appears to be staring us right in the face. If you employ more people in the Home Office to work on processing, then we can clear the backlog quicker. If you decide to ignore the ECHR, then you can get people deported to countries like Rwanda or indeed just where they've come from. And also, as well, if you actually get a bit of bang for your buck from the French, or employ more people to patrol the Channel and instill a policy of turning the boats back, then that would solve the issue. Instead, we're getting out all of this country's cash and we're pouring it into asylum seeker hotels. We're pouring it over to the border there to the French, and now we're going to give it to Frontex, who are living it large now, saying that, oh, because of Brexit, you're going to have to come crawling back to us. Why don't we just do what is within our control?
Well, the business about Brexit just isn't true, because we were never part of Frontex. We only had a working relationship with them. So we were never part of Frontex. So that's one that we can kick into touch straight away. But what we're doing, I don't know. I don't know what Frontex are going to be doing for us, because you're quite right. The Channel for us is the immediate danger, and we have to stop the boats coming across. It's interesting to note, Patrick, just one second, it's interesting to note that the numbers last week, which were horrible, there were actually less boats, more people, which goes to show that it's bigger boats that are being used. So there has been some success in stopping the sale of the smaller boats.
There's been some success in stopping the sale of the smaller boats, but I, for the absolute life of me, Kevin, will never be able to understand why on earth the full might of the entire European Union and Britain's secret services remain unable to stop the transportation of boats and their engines, primarily through Turkey and into the European Union. If you are looking at a lorry load full of boats that could be used across the Channel, why on earth are we allowing them to get straight through? I mean, they're only going one way, aren't they? And they're going the way of the human traffickers. But, Kevin, thank you very much. Kevin Saunders there, former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. I'm going to make an early prediction on this Frontex giving the EU a load of money story, OK? We're going to end up giving them a load of money, and we're going to be asked to use our resources to put our boats in places like the Mediterranean to try to stop the migrant route at source. Now, that would all be well and good. But what about the money we're already giving to the French? We've just seen there that inflation is remaining at that 8.7%. It's an absolute shocker. 7 million quid a day we're spending on asylum seeker hotels. We have got more money now to give to the European Union, to give to other groups linked to the European Union, to try to patrol our own borders instead of doing one simple thing, which is just turn those boats back. Anyway, is the typical Christian stance towards transgender issues seen as too aggressive? Christians are now being told that their religious beliefs are aggressive. That is what a senior church figure thinks. This, is it not, a Christian country? And a reminder of this afternoon's huge breaking news. A man has been arrested after 2 people were stabbed at Central Middlesex Hospital. One of the victims has injuries that are being treated as life-threatening. Armed police remain at the hospital, and we are awaiting the motives. We are awaiting everything, apart from the fact that we know that the man involved is understood to have had self-inflicted serious life-threatening injuries as well, and is in hospital but protective custody. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
News channel.
Now, this is a big story. It's a claim that the Christian approach to transgender issues is viewed as aggressive. The comment was from the Reverend Dr. Malcolm Brown, who's the Church of England's Director of Faith and Public Life. He was saying that's how it's viewed. He was speaking after teaching assistant Christy Higgs won an appeal against her sacking after she'd expressed her views on a trans book in a primary school. What is happening right now is that people with Christian beliefs in a Christian country are being called aggressive bigots in a way that people who are members of another religious community, for example, like the Muslim community, are not. They are treated with tolerance and acceptance, and Christians, in my view, are not. Joining me now is the Director of the Family Education Trust, Peter Williams. Peter, why are Christians being treated like this? Is it because people aren't afraid of them?
I think it's mainly because Christians very often have gender-critical beliefs, as they're called. In other words, they oppose the kind of gender and sexual ideology that's being fed in schools. I mean, we're interested in this as a secular institution, the Family Education Trust, because there are teaching assistants and teachers, as well as parents, who really want to have the freedom to manifest their belief, and that's protected under the Equality Act 2010, the freedom to manifest their philosophical or indeed religious belief that actually gender ideology is harmful. It's not a good thing to introduce to children. And when I look at the Facebook post that Christy Higgs put up in this case, it didn't seem to me like she was manifesting that in a way that was at all problematic. It was certainly, straightforward, but it wasn't rude or mean-spirited. And it seems like because Christians are the ones who very often have a very principled opposition to this stuff, they're the ones who are pushed back against.
Yeah, indeed, but I find it deeply, deeply offensive because we live in a Christian country and it's OK to have religious views and it's all right for other people to have very strong, forthright religious views, but it doesn't appear that it's OK for the Christians. And when Christians say, I believe that there are two genders, I'm very tolerant of anyone wanting to do whatever they want, that's no problem, but I don't want to believe that there are 100 genders and one's a two-spirit penguin or whatever they are, and you instantly become a bigot with out-of-touch views and they want to cancel you. And I wonder whether or not it's time for Christians to be stronger.
I agree. I'm speaking personally as a Christian. Certainly believe it's right to be strong in a manner that is rational and charitable. As long as you are being rational and charitable, I think there's absolutely every case for every Christian doing that. The thing is, it's very difficult because there are so many people in this country who have a kind of totalitarian turn of mind in which they say, if you have these views, you are now unacceptable. You're beyond the pale. And what's that going to do? It's going to chill people's freedom to speak. Not maybe freedom of speech, which is where the government comes in and stops you, but it's the freedom to speak, to manifest your beliefs in a way that is rational.
But it's worth noting that when Christian teachers have at times spoken up and said that they don't agree with this transgender agenda, they can get hounded, taken to court, find a load of money, lose their jobs and have to sell their house. There was a school in Birmingham, a primary school, that had a majority Muslim population where the teacher at that school, the head teacher, wanted to put a little bit of education about same-sex relationships on that agenda. And what happened was a load of Muslim parents turned up with a billboard that basically said you're going to burn in hell, there were megaphones and there was a riot. Can you please explain to me how Christians are the aggressors here?
Yeah, well, indeed. There's a certain ideology of intersectionality that some people who are the most totalitarian kind of appeal to, where they say, well, actually, if you are a particular skin colour or if you're a particular sexuality or a particular religious minority, then all of a sudden you're kind of down the kind of spectrum of power relations, and therefore we're not going to oppose what you're doing as much. Whereas Christians are seen as usually, actually, we're not obviously all white or all homosexual, whatever, but on this, we're seen as so far up in that system that, actually we can be treated much worse than you would with someone who's Muslim or who's Jewish or whatever, who actually has exactly the same
I think it's time that Christians started claiming more religious persecution. I honestly do. Because other people are very protected by this. And I really do. I don't want people to just use that card. I don't want people to just hide behind that card. But I think it is time that people were more vocal about persecution, because it isn't just active and practising Christians, by the way. There's people who go to church every single Sunday. When I say we're a Christian country, there's millions of people out there who don't go to church but would loosely identify as being Christian and having those kind of values and norms that are attributed to those. And I don't think those people should be made to feel as though they are bigoted for those views. I could talk to you all day about this. We are out of time, but thank you very, very much for coming into the studio again. I'll chat to you very soon. That, of course, is Peter Williams there, who's the director of the Family Education Trust. This is a topic I care a lot about, in case you couldn't tell. Later on, I'm going to be talking to an LGBTQ+ activist on this. I'm also going to be talking to a member of the Muslim community on it. Try to cover all bases here. But a reminder of this afternoon's huge breaking news. A man has been arrested after two people were stabbed at Central Middlesex Hospital. One of the victims has injuries that are being treated as life-threatening. Police arrested a man outside the hospital. He has been taken to hospital, having received injuries that are believed to be self-inflicted and that are believed to be life-threatening. Police are not treating this as terror-related. Very shortly, we will be going live to Central Middlesex Hospital to bring you the very, very latest. And the big one, of course, that other breaking news that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this show, a well-placed, well-connected GB News source is telling us that SOS signals have been detected from a wreck near the Titanic. What on earth is going on there? Can anything be done to try to get those people who would appear as still alive back to the surface? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Now, in just a few moments' time, we will be going live to Central Middlesex Hospital, where a major breaking incident is taking place. 2 people have been stabbed. One of them is in a life-threatening condition. The attacker themselves, the alleged attacker themselves, is also in a life-threatening condition, having been apprehended by police. I will be taking you to the scene and we'll get the very latest. But in the other big breaking news as well, this Titanic incident that's taking place, GB News sources are telling us that a distinctive SOS signal has been received, which would imply that the people on board that vessel are alive. However, there is a craft that can recover things at that depth. Where is it, though? It's on the Channel Islands. Why? Well, it's been reported that the US is blocking it from entry. What on earth is going on there? In other news, the money in your pocket. I think it's time to start getting very angry about the state of our economy. Inflation, again, sticking at 8.7%. It has been, our economy, fundamentally mismanaged for far too long by people who, in my view, do not have your best interest at heart. Talking to people who do have your best interests at heart, our armed forces. However, we've got a massive problem because we're being told that we're just clinging on to our NATO membership and influence. Our armed forces has been depleted and depleted and depleted. Yet again, we have the money for everything else in the world. But when it comes to protecting our own citizens, oh, sorry, we've got to make cutbacks. Talking of our own citizens as well, Christians. OK? We are a Christian country. Even there's millions of people out there who don't go to church every Sunday, but loosely identify as being of Christian heritage. They are being bullied, in my view, by people calling them aggressive, outdated bigots when it comes to the transgender agenda that is gripping our education system at the moment. I'm going to speak to an LGBTQ activist. I'm also going to speak to a member of the Muslim community to talk about, genuinely, whether or not Christians could learn a thing or two about standing up for their beliefs by the Muslim community. Patrick Christys on GB News. Loads to go out. In just a few moments' time, we will be live outside Central Middlesex Hospital. That email address, if you want to get in touch on any of the top topics that you've heard there, gbviews@gbnews.com. Polly with your headlines now, though.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. Well, the top story today is that GB News understands the tapping that's been detected in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic is Morse code for SOS, or Save Our Souls. Sources close to the rescue tell GB News the US Coast Guard also decided against funding deep water salvage equipment brought in on military transport because it's 3 to 4 days away. The missing vessel is 3,800 metres below sea level, and GB News understands that last night 2 vehicles were sent down, but both imploded at 3,000 metres deep. 5 people are inside the craft, and they may have as little as 24 hours oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with the British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. Marine operations specialist Mike Wellham says the banging noise could be a positive sign.
These banging sounds being heard every 30 minutes. Now, that is a very clear strategy by, we would hope, the occupants of that vessel to think, right, we signal every 30 minutes there's a little burst of activity, because sound is probably the one way you can locate this submersible down there. Finding the vessel is just the start, because then you've got to get it up. The opportunity to extract the 5 people from the vessel and get them into another vessel down there is nil. That's not going to happen. So you've got to get the vessel to the surface somehow, and that's a whole new challenge.
Well, away from that news story and some breaking news that we've brought to you in the last hour, a man has been arrested following a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital in West London. 2 people sustained injuries, one with life-threatening injuries. The suspect has been admitted to hospital with severe injuries that are being described as self-inflicted and life-threatening. A spokesperson for the hospital said the building was temporarily locked down but has since reopened. Armed police were deployed to the scene, but the incident is not being treated as terror-related. The UK's inflation rate stayed the same this month, despite expectations there may have been a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures, showing inflation stayed at 8.7%, up until May. That's the same rate as April, and it comes as the UK's net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May. Meanwhile, the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April. And at PMQs this afternoon, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, defended the government's plans to tackle inflation, despite strong criticism from Labour.
No amount of personal attacks and petty point scoring can disguise the fact that the honourable gentleman does not have a plan for this country, Mr. Speaker. He comes here every week to make the same petty points. We are getting on and delivering for this country. Yes, Mr. Speaker, inflation is a challenge. That's why we are on track to keep reducing it. We are reducing waiting lists. We are stopping the boats, all while he is focused on the past, focused on the politics. It's all talk, whereas from this government and from this Prime Minister, we deliver for the country.
From the vantage point of his helicopter, everything might look fine. But that's not the lived experience of those on the ground. After 13 years of economic failure across the country, people are paying the price of uncosted, reckless, damaging decisions by the Tory party. And even now, as mortgages go through the roof, the Prime Minister is planning to wave through honours and peerages for those who cause misery for millions.
Now, retail giants WH Smith, Marks & Spencer and Argos have all been named and shamed for failing to pay the minimum wage. Almost £5 million was found to be owed to around 63,000 workers following investigations dating back as far as 2017. Named employers have been made to pay back what they owed and have been fined around £7 million. High street retailer WH Smith was the worst offender, according to HMRC, with the new figures claiming it failed to pay around £1 million to over 17,500 workers. The retailer blamed this on an error relating to its company uniform policy. The government has set out a major package of financial support for Ukraine to bolster the country's economic stability as it continues to push back Russian forces. The package includes a £20 million boost to ensure companies working in Ukraine. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Loan Bank guarantees, will support the restoration of vital public services, including running schools and hospitals. The Prime Minister says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war. That's your latest news. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Regular viewers of this show will know that I normally like to start the hours with a little bit of a rant. We have been somewhat overtaken by those big breaking events taking place at Central Middlesex Hospital. I just wanted to keep you right up to date as the situation develops there. The Metropolitan Police have confirmed that 2 people have been stabbed outside Central Middlesex Hospital in northwest London. One of the victims has life-threatening injuries. The second has non-life-threatening wounds. The suspect has been detained. He also has life-threatening injuries, but they are believed to be self-inflicted. The incident is not being treated as terrorism at this stage, and the hospital was, of course, temporarily locked down. It's now been reopened. Armed police attended the scene, and officers will remain at the hospital whilst the police investigation continues. We will go live to that scene very, very shortly, so I'll bring you all of the latest on that as we get it. There was an air ambulance involved. It was a seriously, seriously major operation, and elements of that operation are ongoing. So we'll bring you updates on that as we get it. But there's loads to get through today, including that story, of course, and the Titanic issue as well. I just wanted to talk about this one briefly with you, if that's OK, because I do feel very strongly about this, and I know a lot of you do as well. Christians are seen as aggressive in court cases involving transgender issues. That is according to a senior member of the Church of England, and they often lose those court cases. Christians are under attack in Britain. They're being bullied. We are a Christian country. Even millions of people who don't actively go to church every Sunday would describe themselves loosely as Christian. But when they have a view that children shouldn't be taught that there are 100 genders, that teachers should help recommend genital mutilation for children, they are now seen as aggressive and offensive religious fundamentalists, and that is wrong. Sensible teachers who stand up against this lose their jobs and face financial ruin. Parents are demonised and stigmatised. Why? Simple, isn't it? Nobody is afraid about offending the Christians. They're an easy, mild-mannered target. They're easy to bully. But the Muslim community, they don't get pushed around like this, do they? No. They are allowed to have their religious ideas, and everybody tolerates it. That's inclusivity, that's diversity. You know what else it is? Fear. If a Muslim teacher expressed concern over LGBTQ plus madness being forced down kids' throats and they lost their job for it, there would be riots on the streets. I mean, there is every chance that it might go too far. We did see parents at a predominantly Muslim primary school in Birmingham hold a demonstration telling teachers that they were going to burn in hell for discussing homosexuality with pupils. So there we go. That obviously went too far. But if there is ever an issue that casts aspersions against Islamic fundamentalist beliefs, it isn't long before there are protests in the streets and massive, aggressive fusses being made about it. Whenever elements of the Muslim community are offended, there can be death threats involved, hordes of people emerge out of nowhere, the police get involved and everybody bends over backwards to accommodate them. The police put teachers into protective custody programmes. The offensive individual goes into hiding. And, of course, the majority of the media do their best to make out like there is nothing to see here. Lots of people are very angry, and it would be unfair to suggest that those people happen to come from certain more extreme elements of that Muslim community. But when a Christian takes offence to something and vocalises it, they're told that their views are backward, outdated, and the school usually finds a convenient way to move them on. The LGBTQ plus lobby attacks them online. the vast majority of the media will refer to them as a bigot, and they have to sell their house to cover their legal costs. Big difference, isn't there? One group of people is treated like a protected species. The other is treated with disdain. One is tolerated, one is abused. Now, from where I'm sitting, people with Christian beliefs and views, even those people who are just loosely Christian, British people with traditional British views, are being treated like second-class citizens in their own country. Well, that's what I think. I want to hear from you on this. GBviews at gbnews.com. I'll be returning to that story a little bit later on with an LGBTQ plus activist, and also in the next hour with somebody who is a member of the Muslim community to actually discuss whether or not the Christians could learn a thing or two from some elements of the Muslim community who are not afraid to stand up for what they believe in. But there we go. But yes, some breaking news. At 6 o'clock, this is UK time, so at 6 o'clock UK time, the US Coast Guard will give a news conference on that submersible vessel that went missing while on a trip to the wreck of the Titanic. We will, of course, bring that to you live. GB News understands that rescuers searching for the Titan sub have heard regular tapping sounds in the form of distress signals from where that vessel went missing. New reports also allege safety fears were raised over the vessel before it went missing, and according to authorities, there is around a day's supply of oxygen left. Now, I am joined now by a remarkable guest, actually, a fascinating individual, and although it's under incredibly bleak circumstances, I'm very, very pleased to be having a chat with him. It's Mike Rees, who is a writer on The Simpsons and who visited the wreck of the Titanic last July on the same submersible that has gone missing. And with Mike is his wife, Denise, who had been due to make the same trip but couldn't go after testing positive for COVID, I believe, has previously been on several dives with Ocean Gate. Both of you, thank you very, very much. It is, look, subject matter aside, tremendous to actually meet you and talk to you on the show. But to the matter in hand, Mike, can I start with you? What's it like to be on this vessel? And you've actually been on this vessel, right? And you've been, no, is that right? What's going on?
I've been on the very sub that's in distress right now, and I did take it to the bottom of the sea, and I did see the Titanic from it. And, you know, a lot of talk is going on about the safety of the vessel. It is a very, very risky proposition. There's anyone who booked this trip knew it was going to be risky. You sign a lengthy waiver that lists really 100 ways to die, things that could go wrong. So everyone walks into this with open eyes. It reminds me of the early space program where people did everything to keep the astronauts safe, but things went wrong multiple times. And you go on and you hope for the best and you're prepared for the worst.
And Denise, obviously Mike was fine and that trip went very well. Sadly, right now, what we have are several wives who are not in the same position that you are, who clearly, I mean, the mind boggles to think about what kind of emotional turmoil they're going through. What were you like about Mike making the trip? I mean, you wanted to actually be with him on the trip, didn't you?
Yes, we were meant to go together. So when we do these adventures together and there's any risk, we figure at least we'll go together. But when we were apart and he was in probably the most dangerous situation he's ever been in, I was worried all day. I was skulking around mission control, trying to find out where the sub was. And I kind of thought the worst could happen if he's gone, then all the Simpsons writers will hate me forever. All his family will hate me, and I'm going to live an anonymous, solitary existence. This will be the end of my life as I know it if something happens.
Goodness gracious me. And again, you know, I just want to reiterate that the breaking news that we'd had a little while ago was that distress signals, knocking, tapping in the form of an SOS signal have reportedly, this is according to a GB News source, been heard from near the Titanic. So at the moment, the clock is ticking, oxygen is running out, and every breath matters, but those people are believed to be alive. Mike, you mentioned the safety of this craft. You said that you knew what you were getting into. There are 100 ways to die on this thing. It's like early year space exploration. But, I mean, do you think that the people on it now will be keeping a calm head? It seems like a little tin can.
It's a very sturdy tin can, and a lot has been made about the simplicity of it, that it's just a tube, really, and you steer it with a real joystick from a game console. And, you know, people are using that to paint it as kind of a rinky-dink thing, but actually it's a real charm to it all, how simple it is, that, you know, in a pinch, I knew how to steer this ship. I navigated the sub for a while. And, you know, it just sinks to the bottom of the ocean by gravity. And then when you're done exploring, you release weights and you bob to the surface with buoyancy. It's extremely low tech, which I liked about it. It was a beautiful experience. It's something to know. And despite the fact that death was looming, and despite the fact that this is the most exciting thing I've ever done, I fell asleep on the way down. It was just it was dimly lit, it was quiet, everyone was calm, that I actually dozed off until we hit the floor of the ocean.
I mean, there's a lot to what you've just said there that is absolutely remarkable, Mike. I'll be honest with you. Difficult to know where to digest all of that in. Can I ask, I'll ask you, Denise, as we understand it, the chief executive and founder of OceanGate, Stockton Rush, is on this vessel. Denise, I'll ask you,
Yes.
but did you meet Stockton? What's he like? Because, again, when stories like this happen, you know, a lot of criticism gets levelled at these people. They're seen as like these wacky inventors that put public safety at risk in order to try and reach this bizarre goal. I mean, have you met the guy?
Yes, we worked with him. We did a very deep dive with him. He piloted a different submersible with us in it down to the Hudson Canyon, a very deep dive, very dangerous, and no one had ever gone to the bottom of Hudson Canyon, as I understand it. We didn't know that when we signed up, that no one had ever done that before. However, I had complete trust in him. I felt he was a visionary. He was doing something no one else was doing. He found ways to do really very impossible, very difficult things. I always saw him as a very handsome superhero in a way. He was doing such extraordinary things. I feel terrible that he was on that ship.
It's the thing that makes me most optimistic about the problems they're having is that he is on board the sub. He built that sub from the ground up. He is an aerospace engineer. Obviously, if he thought it was very dangerous, he wouldn't be on it, but he's there. And he's just a masterful leader, too. He built the thing with this team who just admire him and respect him. And he knows what to do in a crisis. And he's just very focused and the most detail-oriented man I've ever met.
So, Mike, when you were on there and you were going down, before you nodded off, I mean, did anything go wrong? Did it all go smoothly? Were there any hiccups? Was there any sign to you or any indication to you whatsoever that, you know, something could go wrong in the future?
There is as Denise mentioned, we took 3 separate dives with him before this one. And the 4 we've taken in total, there were always communication issues. It's not the fault of the sub or the OceanGate. It's the fault of very deep water, that communication goes in and out. And so there was a little trouble connecting with them once we hit the ocean floor. And then more to the point is just communication confusion. The idea that we're trying to find the Titanic. They are giving us guidance from above. And what they were saying was not connecting well with what we were seeing. And so it took a while just to find their stride and make sure they were all on the same page. And once they did that, we did find the Titanic.
I mean, this is absolutely fascinating, and it's worth noting then for people that clearly from what you're saying, yes, the length of time that this craft has been stuck is obviously now a massive concern, and that's new. But the idea that there was communication issues or that there was the capacity for things to go wrong. That's not new. That is something that you experienced. I've got to ask, Denise, Mike managed to get down there and Mike managed to see the Titanic. If everything goes well and these people are rescued, Denise, would you go back on that vessel and go and try to find the Titanic, do you think?
I was considering doing it again this year, and I was coaxing another friend of mine to come, with whom I've been in touch. Yes, I think I would do it. I might try to do this again.
Even with the same group on the same vessel, would Mike, again, same question to you. So both of you, even now we are having, you know, the story of potentially disaster, both of you would get on that vessel and go back down there to the bottom of the ocean?
If they're returned safely, I would do it. If they don't come back safely, certainly, I'm not an idiot. It would give me great pause. And people should take a lesson from this in that we're developing all this space tourism now. And they're in the exact same position. And, I hope they learn from this example as they can make it as safe as they can, but they're never prepared for everything.
Okay.
When Mike...
Go on.
When Mike went down, he brought extra paper so he knew he would have 5 days of oxygen if anything went wrong. And he thought he would write his last jokes. In case he was found, he would have written something funny at the end. I think there might be, I hope, a sense of peace among these dear people that are trapped in there.
Absolutely. Look, both of you, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on. I think you are both fascinating people for a variety of different reasons. And I hope that we can have a conversation again in the coming days and we're celebrating a successful rescue and maybe we can have a bit more of a light-hearted conversation about all of this. That is absolutely a wonderful couple there. Mike Rees, who is the writer, one of the writers of The Simpsons. He went on the Titanic submersible, the Titan, and actually went down and saw the Titanic. And, of course, Mike's wonderful wife, Denise, as well, who had been due to make that trip but couldn't make it after testing positive for COVID. Both of you, thank you very much. Take care. Wow.
Thank you.
So it's interesting to learn, isn't it, I think, isn't it, that the idea of communication issues are not new. So let's be honest, it might have been a little while before anybody on board at Ocean Gate realised that there was anything seriously, desperately wrong or out of the blue. But also that both of those people would be willing to do that trip again. And interesting, I know a lot of you have been getting in touch on this just quickly, which is that people knowing the risks going in. I think a lot of this talk about whether or not this is a little kind of rickety ship and whether a lot of corners were cut and risks were taken, I do think that it is pretty clear that people knew risks that they were getting involved with and actively wanted to be, desperately trying to explore new elements of the world, even at the ocean bed. But there we go. Loads more on this story on our website, gbnews.com, the fastest-growing national news website in the country. Loads of analysis, big opinion and big breaking news. But yes, inflation remained unchanged last month. It means that yet another rise in interest rates looks inevitable. How can we get out of this financial mess? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6 is Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, welcome back. In a few minutes, I will discuss the worrying claim that our army is so weak that we could lose our influence within NATO. I will also shortly be taking you to Central Middlesex Hospital, where, of course, 2 people have been stabbed. One is in a life-threatening condition. Armed police attended the scene, and the alleged attacker is also in a life-threatening condition. We will be going there very, very shortly. But on to different matters first, because the UK's annual inflation rate remains at 8.7% this morning, despite wider predictions that it would start to come down. Well, it's not looking good for Jeremy from Accounts, as I call him, our Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's plans to halve inflation by the end of the year. Well, here to break down what it means for you is Liam Halligan with On the Money.
When the Office for National Statistics released the latest figures on price pressures, there was an inflation shock. Let's have a look at those numbers. Back in April, inflation was 8.7%. That means prices in general were 8.7% higher than in April 2022. Many economists expected inflation to keep coming down, and yet it stubbornly remained the same. May 2023, inflation still 8.7%. That means Britain is now an outlier across the Western world. Our inflation is the highest in the G7 group of advanced industrialised countries. There we are, 8.7% in May. In the Eurozone, across the channel there, that 20-nation currency bloc, inflation's averaging just 6.1%. And in the US, it's 4%. Though in the US in particular and the Eurozone, energy prices are much cheaper than they are here in Britain. What's causing this high inflation in the UK? It's partly food price inflation. As everyone knows who goes to do their shopping in their supermarket, grocery prices are still sky high and they're rising. In April 2023, we had 19.1% inflation. Again, food prices in general, 19.1% higher than the same month in 2022. And in May, inflation in food prices came down only slightly, 18.3%, still sky high. And on top of that, there's a technical measure that economists look at, including economists at the Bank of England, core inflation. This strips out volatile items, food, energy, other things that are imported to try and understand what's happening domestically. Wage pressures, supply chain issues being experienced by British firms, or underlying inflation or core inflation. It's not only not coming down or staying the same, it's actually going up. 6.2% in March, 6.8% in April, and 7.1% in May. And that's what's really worrying the Bank of England as they contemplate what's going to happen to interest rates. They're making that crucial decision tomorrow. It will be announced at noon. We've seen from 2017 all the way through to the end of 2021, interest rates were ultra low. Lots of households locked in 5-year, 3-year, 2-year mortgage deals. Those mortgage deals are now unwinding as interest rates have risen since late 2021, all the way up to 4.5%. Well, tomorrow we could see a rise to 4.75% by the Bank of England, or indeed a big hefty 0.5 percentage point rise all the way up to 5% as the bank tries to clamp down on inflation. This, of course, does have knock-on effects for mortgages as those 5, 3 and 2-year deals expire. Mortgage rates are set to rise further. They're up above 6% on average, in some cases 7 or 8%. But it's good news for savers. Higher interest rates mean as long as the banks and building societies do pass those rate rises on, you will get a bit more bang for your buck. So there we have it. Britain is now the inflation nation. Price pressures are persisting. This is the story that's going to dominate politics all the way through to the next general election.
OK, there we go. So that's Liam there, whizzing you through the fact that we are now an inflation nation. Loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. So there's a warning from one of NATO's top officials that our armed forces are too small. Do you remember those ridiculous recruitment drives that stopped for the call to prayer during a battle? Do you remember that time that the RAF said that it didn't want to recruit any more white men? Yeah, well, here we go. Our armed forces are now far too small. Of course, we do have the money for a load of other things, don't we? And there's the reaction to that claim that Christians are seen as aggressive when it comes to trans issues. They're the bullies, are they? They're the bigots, standing up for their religious beliefs. What about religious persecution against Christian people in this, a Christian country? And in light of the shenanigans that we've seen in Parliament recently, in light of the political castration for one of the most popular prime ministers that we've ever had for a period of time, at least, is it time to bring back Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage on the same ticket? Is it time for something new? Would that give the Westminster blob a bloody nose? I will be talking with Nigel Farage very, very shortly. And I will be taking you to the Central Middlesex Hospital as well for the latest on the scene after that breaking line that 2 people have been stabbed. One of them is in a life-threatening condition. More as we get it. Headlines now with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. So the latest news is that GB News understands the tapping that's been detected in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that was en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic was Morse code for SOS. Sources close to the rescue tell GB News the US Coast Guard has decided against funding deep water salvage equipment brought in on military transport because it's 3 to 4 days away. The missing vessel is currently 3,800 metres, we believe, below sea level. And GB News understands last night 2 vehicles were sent down, but both imploded at 3,000 metres. 5 people are inside the craft. They may have as little as 24 hours of oxygen left. British Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. Marine operations specialist Mike Wellham told GB News earlier the banging noise could be a positive sign.
It's pretty good news that there was a knocking being picked up. It's been picked up by transponders dropped from aircraft that can pick up sounds. So when they were picked that up, it could be something else banging. We don't know, but it's hopeful that they might still be alive.
Just bringing some more on that breaking news we brought you in the last hour. A man has been arrested following what's described as a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital in West London in the Park Royal area. 2 people sustained injuries, one with life-threatening injuries. The suspect's been admitted to hospital with severe injuries that are being described as self-inflicted. A spokesperson for the hospital says the building was temporarily locked down but has since reopened. Armed police were deployed to the scene, but the incident is not being treated as terror-related. The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations there may be a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed up at 8.7% until May, the same as April. That comes as the UK net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May, and the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Look, let's just go back to our top story, which is that the Metropolitan Police has confirmed that 2 people have been stabbed outside Central Middlesex Hospital in North West London. One of the victims has life-threatening injuries. The suspect has been detained. He also has life-threatening injuries, which are believed to have been self-inflicted. They are saying that it's not terror. Let's get the latest with our London reporter, Lisa Hartley, who is now outside Central Middlesex Hospital. And Lisa, I understand that you were talking to somebody who was an eyewitness, is that correct?
Yeah, there was a short while ago, there was a man outside here, said his name was Gareth Brown. He said that he's been working in the hospital cleaning the chimneys. He said he was stood outside the hospital when he saw a man approaching him with a big pickaxe. So he asked him if he was okay. He said the man replied to him saying, "It's none of your business, get out the way," which he did. He described the man as being very angry. He went into the hospital. He said that's when he did what he did. And then he said he came out, and that's when they were all told to evacuate and get out of the way. So that's from a man called Gareth Brown, and so that's after police received the call at 18 minutes past 1 that there was the reports of 2 people having been stabbed here. When armed police arrived on the scene, they found that one of the people, both were sent to hospital. One of them has life-threatening conditions, and a man suspected of carrying out these attacks was also taken to hospital after being arrested. He's also believed to have life-threatening injuries.
So just to clarify there then, Lisa, what the eyewitnesses said to you is that they were in the hospital, they were working, and then a man approached them looking very angry with a pickaxe. Is that right? And then it's understood that the incident then maybe happened inside the hospital.
That's what the man implied, and he implied that he knew the 2 men that he was chasing. So he also said that he had something to do with, he said he was some kind of contractor, not working with the man, but he said he was responsible for his safety, but I didn't quite understand what he meant by that. He said he was responsible for their safety inside the chimneys. And he said something about an old argument or something that the man shouted at him before when he told him to move out of the way.
Gosh, OK. All right. Well, Lisa's obviously going to be based there at Central Middlesex Hospital for us for the foreseeable future. Hopefully we can get a bit more as well from some of these eyewitnesses. But Lisa, can I just ask, what is the scene like now then? So the hospital is back open, is it? I can see some people behind you. It's quite hard to make out exactly what's going on. Has the evacuation stopped now?
Yeah, I spoke to some patients coming out of the hospital, and they said they didn't see or hear anything apart from being told just to wait over that side of the hospital whilst it was all evacuated, and then the hospital reopened, and then they went back inside to their appointments.
OK, all right. And the sense of the hospital now is just business as usual, is it? I mean, there doesn't seem to be mass panic or anything like that. Are there still police hanging around?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, as you can see, there's many members of the media behind me for Just Step Out. You've still got patients going in and out, but obviously it's the end of the day, really, so there's not so many. There's a few staff members standing outside, but, yeah, it's all reopened now. The police say that they're continuing their presence here whilst they carry out their investigation, which they say they do not believe is terror-related.
OK, Lisa, thank you very, very much. I'll go to you again very shortly, I imagine. That's Lisa Hartley, who's outside Central Middlesex Hospital for us. So just to recap then, Lisa has been talking to somebody who says they were an eyewitness to this attack. Their job was responsible for cleaning the chimneys inside the hospital. They were saying that they saw a man approach them with a pickaxe. He asked that man whether or not he was all right, to which the guy, who seemed very angry, said, "It's none of your business, get out of the way." That chap then got out of the way and witnessed what appeared to be some kind of chase. He said inside the hospital. It's important to say the police's statement appears to allude to the incident taking place just outside the hospital, but I'm sure that will get cleared up for us. 2 people were then injured. The line there, of course, is, it would appear anyway, that according to this eyewitness, the individual, the suspect, had a pickaxe. We've been told so far that it's a stabbing, so more detail again needs to be shed some light on when it comes to that. One of the injured is in a life-threatening condition. The air ambulance was also called. Armed police were called. The other person is believed to be in a non-life-threatening condition, and the attacker themselves, according to police, has self-inflicted wounds and in a life-threatening condition. As we get more on this from outside the hospital, I will go back to Lisa. That was Lisa Hartle there, outside Central Middlesex Hospital. But now, to a stark warning from one of NATO's most senior officials. General Sir Tim Radford says that Britain is only just holding on to its influence in the organisation because our army is now too small. I think it's fantastic, isn't it, that we did all these diversity recruitment drives? That was a treat, didn't it? Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said last year that the UK needed a bigger army. At the moment, we only have 76,000 troops. That is a fall of 21,000 in the last 10 years. Joining me now is the former head of counter-terrorism. It's Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, what's going on? Is the army not an attractive place for people to work, or are we making silly cuts?
Well, both of those are true at the same time, really, at the moment, Patrick. So, firstly, this week we had a report by a chap called Haythornthwaite about the review of armed forces incentivisation. That showed force deficits across the piece, where from October 21 to September 22, there was a 30% reduction in those coming forward to join the regular forces, with a 17% increase in outflow, resulting in a reduction of 4,250 regular personnel. So you have a problem at the front end with recruiting and retention. At the same time, you have a Defence Command paper about to come out. It's going to be delayed because of the Vilnius meeting in NATO, which is going to at least cut us to 72,500. And last month, there was a sort of straw man, a paper to sort of flag things up to see what people made of it, that made the notion that we would be going down to 60,000. Now, sometimes they do that so that if we end up with 64 or 68, people say it wasn't as bad as it could be. But it's looking pretty stark on both inflow, outflow and total numbers that we'll be going to for the future for the Army. But it's worth saying that the RAF and the Navy are far more important in vital interests for the UK than the Army.
OK. I think what is also important to note is that our military can't go on strike in the way that hospital consultants who are on probably around 5 times their salary can if they choose to go on strike. And therefore, they have very little leverage when it comes to things like pay and conditions. I mean, the mind boggles, really, doesn't it? We seem to have had these bizarre recruitment drives that are targeting, as much diversity as possible. Even serious talk about the RAF deliberately not processing and passing through people because they didn't have enough diverse recruits. And then now we end up in a situation where the army feels underpaid and undervalued, struggling to get people on board, and it's being cut. I mean, the first job of any government is to protect its citizens, isn't it? And we're just depleting our own military.
Yeah, that's true. And I think there are 2 points relevant to that. The first one is that we become more willing to sign up for what we call military aid to the civil authority task. That is, stepping in for all those who are on strike, be it the border force or ambulance workers. And often, of course, the people who are stepping in to do that are paid less. The second thing, of course, is that we do have to look at what the armed forces pay review bodies come out with. They set the parameters for what will be the award in subsequent years. But one thing that there's no appetite for a current government or any government to do is build back to Cold War forces. And there is still this notion that technology will overcome the former mass. Now, I'm pretty sceptical about that, as Tim Radford's boss, General Cavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, is, when he sort of said the scale of the war in Ukraine is out of sync with our recent thinking and experience. So, mass can matter, precision can be brilliant, and it can beat mass, but you need a lot of it, and that's also very expensive.
Every time I listen to the radio, there is an advert for a recruitment drive for the army. And what that says is, nothing can replace a soldier. Nothing can do what a soldier can do. So if they have got this belief behind the scenes that, it's all right, AI and technology will step in, that is actually the opposite of what their recruitment drive is telling people, which is that only human beings can do it. But the reality is that they're not really after that many human beings. In fact, they want fewer of them. They're not going to pay them that well or treat them that well. And we, as a result, are just clinging on to NATO relevance at the time that the world is at its most freebrow.
Yeah, I think you always have to be careful of any organisation that says that people come first when they don't sort of either reward them properly or treat them well. But of course, you need a sort of marry-up between technology and people. You need technologists who can operate people. The days where artificial intelligence and strategic autonomy to launch weapons, we're light years away from that. That's just not going to happen. But you need smart operators for the high technological things. But at the end of the day, war is still a bloody affair, and the nature of war hasn't changed. You need people who can go on the ground and hold ground and take ground if you need it. That's what an army is for. But it's also relevant probably for the NATO forthcoming Vilnius thing, that may alter where we fight, because where you fight sort of helps to posit where your equipment might be. So it might be that we're given a new role, which is to go to the high north and the sort of Arctic and Norway, and that will be the expertise for British forces alongside the RAF and the Royal Navy, protecting both the airspace of NATO and the North Atlantic.
Major General, thank you very much. Major General Chip Chapman there, the former head of counter-terrorism, reacting to the fact that our army is shock horror too small. Well, it's a shame, because we've been cutting away at it for a very long period of time. We treat people in our armed forces much worse than we actually treat people who are out there in force on strike, like train drivers and junior doctors and all of this stuff. They're, of course, not allowed to strike people in our armed forces. And then on top of that, when they come out of the armed forces and they might have a mental health issue or something like that, we treat them like dirt again. So it's not really a shock, is it? But there we go. Anyway, is the typical Christian stance towards transgender issues too aggressive? This is an important topic. Christians are being called aggressive bigots for having views on transgenderism. We've had a lot of trans stories in the last couple of days, haven't we? People identifying as cats, does that make you trans mammal? But also about pupils being booted out of schools for having the controversial view, that there are just two genders. I've been looking into this. We heard from Christian Concern. We're going to hear from a member of the LGBTQ+ community, an activist. And then after that, we're going to hear from a member of the Muslim community, because what I want to know is why on earth, when the Muslims parrot exactly the same views as fundamentalist Christians over this, why on earth they are tolerated and Christians are demonised? Remarkable, isn't it? Can't understand why that's happening. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. News channel.
Are Christians being bullied for their views? Because the Christian approach to transgender issues, the fundamentalist Christian approach to transgender issues, is being viewed as aggressive. That is according to Reverend Dr. Malcolm Brown, who's the Church of England's Director of Faith and Public Life. He was speaking after teaching assistant Christy Higgs won an appeal against her sacking after she'd expressed her views on trans books in primary schools. Now, Reverend Brown said in The Telegraph, senior contacts in the legal profession told us of a judiciary increasingly frustrated with the way that these cases were being argued in the courts, with the, quote, aggressive voices beginning to be seen as typically Christian. Joining me now is Peter Tatchell, LGBTQ activist and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Peter, thank you very, very much. Do you think that fundamentalist, traditional, evangelical Christians who would have a view that you can only be one of two genders are being bullied in this society for their religious beliefs?
I don't think they're being bullied. They are entitled to their point of view, and I would defend their right to express their point of view as much as I disagree with it. In this case, Christy Higgs won her appeal. The tribunal ruled that she had been unlawfully sacked because she was not abusing or insulting or threatening or harassing LGBT plus people. She was expressing a point of view. She wasn't discriminating. There was no evidence that she would discriminate in the provision of her teaching services at the school. So quite rightly on those grounds, her appeal was upheld.
The fact is, though, that this has had to go to court, that this lady's career was initially ruined, etc. Peter, I think this is an issue that is going to loom large, and indeed I am going to be speaking to somebody from the British Muslim community in the next hour. What is going to happen, Peter, when the trans lobby really meets British Muslims?
Well, that will be an issue for them and Muslims, but it isn't a Muslim LGBT issue or a Muslim trans issue. This is a human rights issue. I mean, in this particular case, Christy Higgs objected to LGBT education in schools. Now, that is very offensive. It's not a crime, but it is very offensive because there are LGBT plus kids in our schools, and it's quite right that their same-sex families should be acknowledged along with all other families. So this isn't about privileging trans people or LGBT people in general. This is just about including them according to the principles of the Equality Act. And of course, Christians, Muslims and Jews, they should also be included and recognised because they are part of our society.
Should Christians keep their views to themselves on this, do you think?
No, in a free and democratic society, people of all faiths, including Christians, have a right to express their point of view. And I have on many occasions defended that right, even though they've said things that I've strongly objected to.
Could I ask,
it's about freedom of expression.
Could I ask, Peter, why, when there is more of a divergence, really, I would argue, between what the LGBTQ plus lobby are pushing for and what we know that the vast majority of the British Muslim population believe, why is it that the trans lobby is not maybe being a bit more forceful there? Is it fear?
No. When it comes to human rights, those human rights apply to everyone. Christians, Muslims, LGBTs, Black and Asian people, for everyone. So there's no exceptions. No ifs, no buts. And, you know, I will defend Muslims, Christians, and other people of faith who are being discriminated or harassed. That is absolutely wrong. But I think they should also acknowledge that if they want respect for themselves as people of faith, they should respect others who happen to have a different sexuality or gender identity. It's all about live and let live, love and let love.
Look, Peter, thank you. Bit short and sweet. We've been squeezed by a couple of pretty major news events, so thank you very much for sitting on the line. But it's great to get your views as ever. Peter Tatchell, the LGBTQ+ activist and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Like I said, in the next hour, I am going to have loads on. I'm going back live to Central Middlesex Hospital after 2 people were stabbed. I'm also, of course, going to be talking to the one and only Nigel Farage. Is it time that Nigel and Boris Johnson join together on a dream ticket in order to go and try and give the Westminster blob a bloody nose? I will put that directly to him. And I'm going to be talking to a member of the British Muslim community to find out what they think about the fact that Christians apparently are being seen as outdated bigots for their views when it comes to trans. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and it's going to be a very busy hour. That breaking story, 2 people stabbed, 1 in a life-threatening condition at a London hospital. The alleged attacker is also in a life-threatening condition. We will be outside that hospital with more eyewitness testimony very shortly. In other news, yes, this case now, SOS signals, a GB News source says, have been received from what is understood to be that submersible somewhere near the wreckage of the Titanic. A press conference will be held in the next hour. So make sure you stay tuned because we will be taking that press conference live. It would appear that at the moment, the indications are that those people are alive, but oxygen, of course, is running out. This is going to be a big one as well. I will be joined by Nigel Farage, who will be answering the question as to whether or not it's time for him to join forces now with Boris Johnson and give the Westminster blob a bloody nose. People feel let down. Maybe this lot could actually help up and stand up for the little people. And in other news, we're also going to be talking about this, because this is one of the reasons why people want him back, isn't it? The UK now is supposedly about to give the EU a load of money to help control our own borders. What on earth is going on here? Why can't we get anything right? And finally, as well, I will be talking to a member of the British Muslim community about an issue that I think is only going to get worse. Christians are being called bigots and out of touch because they have the view, in some senses, fundamentalist Christians, that there are only 2 genders, OK? But why is the British Muslim community, who has the same view, not getting anything like the same kind of stick? Patrick Christys on GB News. GBViews at gbnews.com. Loads coming your way. Get those emails coming in on that whole host of top topics. But now it's the headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Well, the top story this hour is that GB News understands the tapping that's been detected in the Atlantic in the search for the missing tourist vessel hoping to visit the Titanic is Morse code for SOS. Sources close to the rescue tell GB News the US Coast Guard has also decided against funding deep-water salvage equipment being brought in on military transport because it's 3 to 4 days away. The missing vessel is 3,800 metres below the surface of the sea. And GB News understands that last night 2 vehicles were sent down, but both imploded at 3,000 metres. 5 people are inside that craft. They may have as little as 20 hours oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, alongside the British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. Well, we spoke to Marine Operations Specialist Mike Wellham earlier. He said the banging noise is a positive sign.
It's pretty good news that there was a knocking being picked up. It's been picked up by transponders dropped from aircraft that can pick up sounds. So when they were picked that up, it could be something else banging. We don't know, but it's hopeful that they might still be alive.
A man's been arrested following a stabbing incident at Central Middlesex Hospital in West London. 2 people sustained injuries, 1 with life-threatening injuries. The suspect's been admitted to hospital with severe injuries that are being described as self-inflicted. A spokesperson for the hospital says the building was evacuated but has since reopened. Armed police were deployed to the scene, but the incident not being treated as terror-related. The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations. There may be a slight fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing inflation stayed at 8.7%, up until May. That's the same rate during April. That comes as the UK's net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May as well. Meanwhile, the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April. And at PMQs this afternoon, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak defended the government's plans to tackle inflation despite strong criticism from Labour. The Labour leader accusing the government of supporting the industries that are causing misery.
No amount of personal attacks and petty point scoring can disguise the fact that the honourable gentleman does not have a plan for this country, Mr. Speaker. He comes here every week to make the same petty points. We are getting on and delivering for this country. Yes, Mr. Speaker, inflation is a challenge. That's why we are on track to keep reducing it. We are reducing waiting lists. We are stopping the boats, all while he is focused on the past, focused on the politics. It's all talk, whereas from this government and from this Prime Minister, we deliver for the country.
I'm sure from the vantage point of his helicopter, everything might look fine. But that's not the lived experience of those on the ground. After 13 years of economic failure across the country, people are paying the price of uncosted, reckless, damaging decisions by the Tory party. And even now, as mortgages go through the roof, the Prime Minister is planning to wave through honours and peerages for those who cause misery for millions.
Retail giants WH Smith, Marks & Spencer and Argos have been named and shamed for failing to pay the minimum wage. Almost £5 million was found to be owed to around 63,000 workers following investigations dating back as far as 2017. Named employers have been made to pay back what they owed and have been fined around £7 million. High street retailer WH Smith was the worst offender, according to HMRC, with the new figures claiming it failed to pay around £1 million to over 17,500 workers, the retailer blaming that on an error related to its company uniform policy. Now, the government has set out a major package of financial support to Ukraine to bolster the country's economic stability as it continues to push back against Russian forces. The package includes a £20 million boost to ensure companies working in the country. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Bank loan guarantees, will support the restoration of vital public services, including running schools and hospitals. The Prime Minister says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war. That's the latest from GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Lots on this hour. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for the very latest press conference as the situation near the Titanic gets incredibly serious. The clock is ticking, oxygen is running out. SOS in Morse code is understood to have been heard from somewhere near the wreckage of the Titanic. There will be a press conference by the US Coast Guard. We will take that live when it starts. I will, of course, also be taking you to Central Middlesex Hospital after 2 people were stabbed there, 1 in a life-threatening condition. It is not being believed to be treated as a terror incident, however, lots of unanswered questions. But there's another big story in town today, and this is what I wanted to go out, have a little bit of a rant with you at the start of the show. I think it's time to give the Westminster establishment snobs a bloody nose. It's time for the Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage dream ticket. The British public are being ignored, and I, for one, am sick of it. People voted big time for Boris to get Brexit done, to control our borders. In 2015, nearly 4 million people voted for UKIP to get Brexit done and to control our borders. And look what's happened. Boris Johnson was ousted after a concerted campaign from the media and a kangaroo court. We've now got an unelected Prime Minister who doesn't have the political balls to stop the boats. Labour are openly talking about dragging us back towards the European Union. The establishment thinks they've won. They think the adults are back in the room. Now, we have loads of disillusioned red wall voters, millions of disillusioned Tories as well, who just can't bring themselves to vote for this Conservative Party. And the likes of Harriet Harman parading around like the saviour of British democracy. What we have witnessed is the Labour Party and soft Tories successfully remove the Tories' biggest vote winner, Boris Johnson. It's a political masterstroke. Sunak doesn't vote in the Boris parliamentary pass debate because he couldn't be seen to vote against Boris. But people aren't stupid. People know where his loyalties lie. It's not with Bojo, is it? Our politicians right now look down on the millions of ordinary Brits who want to protect British values and culture, who think there is a country that is worth conserving, who are proud of our history, who want to protect our borders, who don't want us to be pushed around by Brussels, who refuse to lie down and just take it from the wokerati. They think those people are thick. They treat them with disdain. They look down their noses at them. They laugh at you. Well, why not stick it right up them then? Get the Boris and Farage dream ticket on the go. Iron out their differences. Let Nigel talk Boris out of his big green agenda. Stand for election and get millions of votes. Have that. Wallop. You're not laughing now, are you? The only thing saving Rishi Sunak's version of the not-so-Conservative Party from total annihilation, and the only thing making Labour so smug up north, is that Boris and Nigel aren't standing. The common man and woman have been kicked around for far too long. It's time to give the Westminster snobs a good kicking right back. Well, that's what I think I want to hear from you, gbviews@gbnews.com. I'll have the man himself on very, very shortly, just to ask him just that, you know, is it not time that maybe he teamed up with Boris Johnson and people felt a bit more representative? But let's get more on the top story as it stands right now. An eyewitness has told GB News that the suspect in a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital was waving a pickaxe. The Metropolitan Police has confirmed that 2 people were stabbed. They are staying outside the hospital in northwest London. Eyewitness report appears to slightly contradict that, but we'll get more on that in a second. One of the victims has life-threatening injuries. The suspect has been detained. He also has life-threatening injuries. They are believed to be self-inflicted. The incident is not thought to be related to terrorism. Let's get the latest now with our London reporter, Lisa Hartle, who is outside Central Middlesex Hospital. Lisa, what is the latest where you are?
Well, as you said, the hospital was evacuated just as this incident was taking place, but it is open again now. We spoke to a man earlier who said he witnessed part of the attack. His name called Gareth Brown. He saw a man charging towards him with a pickaxe. He spoke to us earlier, so we've got a grab just to play you now.
Shocked, really. Just to see, obviously, just to be this close to an incident like this is quite shocking, really, yeah. This afternoon, we just see him come running out the side of the building with a pickaxe in his hand, chasing two people, which we thought were 2 lads that done something incriminating inside the hospital. Hence, that's why he was chasing them. So that's why we have approached him to make sure he was OK. But that time, he's come towards us, swinging his axe, and he's just told us it's none of our business, get out of our way. So I kindly stepped out of his way, and he's just gone and done what he's done.
So as you heard there, he witnessed a man charging towards him with the pickaxe. He asked him if he was OK because he said he thought that the 2 men he was chasing might have done something incriminating. He was told to get out of the way, which of course he did, a man with a pickaxe saying that to him. He said the next thing he knew was they were all told to evacuate over to the other side of the hospital. That's when it was all evacuated and locked down. People were seen fleeing from the hospital. There's reports that some patients posted on social media they had to hide in some rooms whilst this all unfolded. But the police have said that they've obviously arrested a man now that they suspect carried out these attacks. He's in hospital with life-threatening injuries, as you said, and the police said that they don't think this is not a terror-related incident, and the hospital is now open once again.
OK, Lisa, thank you very, very much. It's Lisa Hartle, who's outside Central Middlesex Hospital. Yeah, that was a fascinating insight, I think, wasn't it, from the individual who says that he was face-to-face with that man who's wielding an axe at him, apparently chasing people through the hospital. There is a slight discrepancy between what that individual is saying and what we know so far from the police. Of course, more clarity will emerge, but the police seem to be suggesting that the attack happened outside the hospital. What that chap, from what I could gather there, appeared to suggest it was happening inside, which would tie in a little bit with eyewitness reports that we're also getting through of people having to cower in safe rooms, etc., the evacuation taking place. Armed police race to the scene. There is no known motive yet, although the police are saying they do not believe it is terror, and they are also saying they are not looking for anyone else in connection with it. One person injured in a serious condition, a life-threatening condition. Another person injured in a stable condition, the attacker themselves in a life-threatening condition, although those wounds are believed to be self-inflicted. Massive operation there, huge amounts of police resources, armed, as well, of course, as the air ambulance. But this is important for you to note as well. Around 6 o'clock UK time, the US Coast Guard will give a news conference on the submersible vessel that went missing while on the trip to the wreck of the Titanic. Just remember, we did do that yesterday. It was around the same time, but sometimes these go early, especially in light of the fact that we are believing anyway that we're hearing tapping noises in Morse code for SOS coming from this vessel. So we will take that live as soon as it drops. So stay tuned, because the second that drops, we will go live to that press conference. There will be a lot to learn, really, from the latest on it. GB News does understand that rescuers searching for the Titan sub have heard regular tapping sounds in the form of distress signals from where that vessel went missing. New reports also allege that safety fears were raised over the vessel before it went missing, and according to authorities, there is around a day's supply of oxygen left. The clock is very much ticking at the moment, but just want to emphasise, the indications at the minute would appear to be that those people on board that vessel are alive, and therefore it is vital that they get the help that they need. That help, by the way, could well still be sitting on the tarmac in Jersey in the Channel Islands, because there is a company there that is saying that they've got the capacity to be able to get down to the bottom of the ocean where they are and try to get them back up. As it's understood at the minute, the US is blocking that, which I think is absolutely astonishing. More on that as it comes to us. But earlier, I had this kind of bizarre, amazing conversation, albeit under very depressing circumstances, really, with Mike Rees, who is a writer on The Simpsons. Now, he visited the wreck of the Titanic last July on the same submersible that has gone missing. Also with him was his wife, Denise, who had been due to make the same trip but couldn't go after testing positive for COVID. Let's just play a little clip of that now.
You know, a lot of talk is going on about the safety of the vessel. It is a very, very risky proposition. Anyone who booked this trip knew it was going to be risky. You sign a lengthy waiver that lists really 100 ways to die, things that could go wrong. So everyone walks into this with open eyes. And, you know, it just sinks to the bottom of the ocean by gravity. And then when you're done exploring, you release weights and you bob to the surface with buoyancy. It's extremely low tech, which I liked about it. It was a beautiful experience. It's something to know. And despite the fact that death was looming, and despite the fact that this is the most exciting thing I've ever done, I fell asleep on the way down. It was just it was dimly lit, it was quiet, everyone was calm, that I actually dozed off until we hit the floor of the ocean.
I've got to ask, Denise, Mike managed to get down there, and Mike managed to see the Titanic. If everything goes well and these people are rescued, Denise, would you go back on that vessel and go and try to find the Titanic, do you think?
I was considering doing it again this year, and I was coaxing another friend of mine to come, with whom I've been in touch. Yes, I think I would do it. I might try to do this again.
Well, it's numerous different reasons why that interview was quite surreal, wasn't it? But I'm joined now by Ryan Ramsey, who was in the Navy's submarine service for 23 years. Ryan, look, great to see you again. So, we understand that there has been a knocking in Morse code for SAS, which has been detected. SOS, sorry, that has been detected. This is presumably a positive sign.
It is, if it can be verified, and I'm sure at 6 o'clock when the Coast Guard make their statement, they'll give more detail that leads them to the conclusion that that was SOS and detected by sonar buoys.
OK, right. So, look, the fact is that if they are alive and they are down there, they are going to need rescuing sharpish. From what I can gather, there appears to be one company that is saying that they have the capacity to do this. They are unfortunately currently based in the Channel Islands and therefore are not being allowed to go over there and help at the minute. Do you know of any other technology that is around at the scene at the minute that might be able to actually help get these people up?
No, I don't. And I think the whoever's made the decision not to allow them to come over to the US will have appraised fully that capability to work out whether it is capable of doing what they need. I think the challenge here is not putting a remotely operated vehicle down 4,000 meters to look, because those there are some that do that, and I expect the Jersey firm is part of that. The real challenge is, well, how do you recover the submersible back to the surface? It's heavy, it's got people in it, So you need some form of capability that's able to do that. That takes a lot of power on a remotely operated vehicle to be able to do that at depth.
Indeed. And you were submariner, part of the submarine service for 23 years. You would have been trained to be able to mentally deal with a situation, I would imagine, a bit like this. What do you think those people on board that submarine will be thinking right now? How would you be dealing with it? What would you be thinking?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Training is everything, and every submariner across the world goes through escape training. Every submariner does training to deal with the claustrophobic area that you operate in, and every submariner understands the risk of what they do while serving their country. I feel absolutely for those people on board the Titan, because the conditions are extreme. If you imagine that the water temperature is 1 degree or less than 1 degree Celsius, it's going to be cold down there. Running out of oxygen, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be dark down there because there's no power to the Titan vessel at the moment. So just keeping focused and keeping mentally focused and keeping calm and not being stressed is exceptionally difficult.
Look, thank you very, very much for your time again. I'm sorry we're a bit pressed for time there, but I will hopefully talk to you again tomorrow. And maybe we will be having some good news. Like I said before, that press conference due to take place around the 6 p.m. mark. We will take that live here on GB News. Ryan, thank you. Ryan Ramsey, who was in the Navy submarine service for 23 years. A reminder for you that the US Coast Guard is holding a news conference on that search, believed to take place at around 6 p.m. We will bring that to you live here at GB News. Sometimes, though, especially in light of the fact that we might have some big breaking news to confirm an SOS signal in Morse code, that could be brought forward. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. We'll take that to you live as we can. Now, loads more on that story on our website, gbnews.com. It's the fastest-growing national news site in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion, and the latest breaking news. But hold on to your hats, because Nigel Farage has hinted he could return to frontline politics. He's even said the conditions in which he'll do it. I said it at the top of the show. Is it time for a dream ticket of Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson? They'd do some damage, wouldn't they? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So
at Jubes & Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, get a load of this. Instead of turning the boats back and getting people on planes to Rwanda, it looks like we're about to send the EU a boatload of cash in order to try to patrol our own borders. It's a shocker. But, of course, I'm going to be talking now to Nigel Farage about his possible return to politics. Much has been said about that in recent weeks. And Nigel is on record saying that he's open to the idea of proportional representation being introduced. I mean, of course he is. And a look at recent general election results will help us to illustrate this argument. So here is why a Nigel Farage and whisper it quietly dream ticket with Boris Johnson comeback might actually work. In the 2019 general election, the Conservative Party had a 43.6% of the vote, which gave it a majority of a stonking 365 seats. Labour won 32.2% of the vote, giving them 203 seats. The Lib Dems won 11.5% of the vote, and they won just 11 seats. And the Brexit Party had 2% of the vote, but no seat. Now, some people will argue that parties like the Lib Dems should have greater presence in the House of Commons because of the significant numbers voting for them. But the argument was really made after the 2015 election. And that is when nearly 4 million people voted for UKIP, giving it a 12.6% share of the vote. But the party only returned 1 MP, Douglas Carswell. And that doesn't seem quite right, does it? I am delighted to say that Nigel Farage joins me right now. Nigel, a Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson dream ticket would do some serious damage. Why don't you team up and give them a bloody nose?
Potentially. I mean, the trouble is, of course, that Boris believes in open-door immigration. The trouble is that Boris believes in net zero. But he, of course, I mean, if anybody can turn on a sixpence on policy, it's Boris Johnson. The point I was making when I first said this was this. Boris Johnson, I was saying 2 weeks ago, is finished in the Conservative Party. And I think the events that have played out in the last fortnight have proved that point. If Boris Johnson has one legacy, it is Brexit. There are 2 names in this country associated with Brexit, whether you're for or against, and it is Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson. Labour will take us pretty much straight back into a single market, certainly by 2026. And there could be a fight for Brexit, but takes place again at some point in the late 2020s. At that point, you know, I think Boris and I would have to try and work together. Whether he'd want to is another thing.
But you have a captive audience of millions because you've got disillusioned red wallers now who I still don't think are particularly enamoured with Keir Starmer. They've not gone running back to the Labour Party, so they want someone to vote for. You've also got a lot of disillusioned Tories who can't forgive the Conservative Party for the way they treated Boris, but also fundamentally don't think it's a Conservative party. If you stood, you would get millions of votes.
So I polled this recently, and this is the first time I've said this on GB News. I polled this recently, and the figures say 4 million would vote for me tomorrow.
Just you, and that's without Boris?
Me leading would vote for me tomorrow, and that's before any campaign or any announcement I'm interested in doing it again. So I think it's realistic to think we could get that to 5 million.
Yeah.
We can get that up to about 17, 18% of the national vote. I believe that even on the first past the post, that's achievable. But, Patrick, what's it going to get me?
Yeah.
I mean, am I going to bang my head against the brick wall? I won the 2014 European elections, the 2019 European elections under PR, and the 2015 result you've just showed the audience. So, for me to do this again, to think I'm going to get no return is a very difficult thing to do. However, if we had PR, then a genuinely centre-right party that was focused around actually putting British people first, genuine border controls, delivering on Brexit, what we thought was achievable in terms of regulations and borders, then I think a party like that would get 25% of the vote and without doubt hold the balance of power in Westminster. And I am not just saying this out of naked personal self-interest. I don't need to go back into politics at all. I'm perfectly happy with life as it is. But here's the point. There is a growing public appetite for change.
Oh, yeah.
Over half the population now think the first-past-the-post system is outdated. The Daily Mail will tell you it gives strong and stable government. Well, think about the last 13 years. 5 years of it under this system was a coalition with the Lib Dems anyway, and the last 8 years have been complete and utter chaos. If this is strong and stable government under first-past-the-post, I'd rather try something different.
So how do you get PR, then? How does it actually happen? Do Labour have to win and then have a referendum?
So this is interesting, because the last Labour... This has, again, not been noticed by the commentariat. The last Labour government voted strongly for proportional representation. Now, if Labour win comfortably, I suspect it will go back on their political agenda. If they had to do a deal with the Lib Dems, we'd almost certainly get it. Whether it would take a referendum, I suspect that it probably would. I suspect that it probably would take a referendum, and I think the first-past-the-post argument would look pretty Edwardian.
Yeah.
Compared to what... I mean, so many people I know, living in safe Labour or Conservative seats, just don't bother to vote. They cannot see the point of voting, even in big swing elections. A lot of young people feel their vote simply isn't worth it. My grandparents' generation all voted. They lived through 2 world wars and thought they should use their vote. Younger people say, what is the point if it doesn't get me direct representation? So I think if there was a referendum on it, I really do think reform would win.
Yeah, and I think that people have massively shifted as well. There's a lot of people... I used to be, for example, quite pro first past the post, and then I've just looked at, really, the events of the last few years, and I've completely changed on it.
Yeah.
I've completely changed on it.
Yeah.
And I actually think the case for it is quite shoddy. Some people would say, Nigel, that one of the things propping up Rishi Sunak from total annihilation, but also one of the reasons why the Labour Party can afford to be quite smug about taking back the Red Wall, actually is the fact that you won't stand there, or not necessarily going to stand there, alongside Boris Johnson. Do you not just fancy sticking it to them?
Do you know, I mean, in 2015, it was interesting. The Tory press gave me hell, and yet I took more Labour votes. UKIP took more Labour votes than it took Conservative votes. Cameron never thought he'd get a majority. He did, and it led to the referendum. I think with where we are now, if I was to intervene in this situation, it's the 2019 Conservative vote that I would hammer even more than I would the Labour vote, just given where the numbers are today. And people say to me, Nigel, you should just give the Tories a kicking. They deserve annihilation. But you know what? I need something positive to fight for, not something negative. All through a quarter of a century of campaigning for UKIP, through some good times and some pretty tough times as well, there was always a positive goal at the end, which was achieving national independence. Right at the minute, it's a little bit difficult to see what that goal is.
Saving Britain?
Well, yes, but if I get millions of votes and it leads to a bigger Labour majority and little representation, what would I have achieved?
Nigel, thank you. You'll be on the box later, won't you?
7 o'clock.
7
Absolutely.
o'clock. As ever, good stuff. Nigel Farage there. Thank you very, very much. Right, OK, get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Loads more between now and 6 p.m. Find out why Rishi Sunak could be on a collision course with his own cabinet, again, over a new border deal with the EU. But there's also reaction to the claim that Christians are seen as aggressive when it comes to trans issues. I will be talking to a member of the British Muslim community about that. That should be a fascinating discussion. And at 6 p.m, we will bring you live here on GB News the latest news conference with the US Coast Guard. The search for that missing submersible near the Titanic continues. But now it's headlines with Polly.
Well, the latest news on that submersible is that GB News understands from sources close to the scene that tapping that's been detected in the search for the vessel that went missing on the way to the Titanic shipwreck is Morse code for SOS. Sources close to the rescue tell us the US Coast Guard decided against funding deep water salvage equipment brought in on military transport because it would be 3 to 4 days away. The missing vessel is 3,800 metres below the level, below the surface of the sea. And GB News understands last night 2 vehicles were sent down, but both imploded at 3,000 metres down. 5 people are inside that craft. They have as little as 20 hours oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Zarwood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. Marine operations specialist Mike Wellham told us the banging noise, though, could be a very positive sign.
It's pretty good news that there was a knocking being picked up. It's been picked up by transponders dropped from aircraft that can pick up sounds. So when they will pick that up, it could be something else banging, we don't know, but it's hopeful that they might still be alive.
Let's bring you up to date with events in Paris. At least 16 people have been injured, 7 in a critical condition. It's believed to be a gas explosion in Paris. If you're watching on television, you can see the puffs of smoke there and indeed the fire crews in attendance trying to put the flames and the billowing smoke out. A Paris police official has said the exterior of the building, it's in the Latin Quarter incidentally, had fallen into the street as a result of that explosion. Firefighters and police are on the scene. More as we have it. And some other breaking news from the UK this time. A man has been arrested following a stabbing at Central Middlesex Hospital in West London. 2 people sustained injuries, one with life-threatening injuries. The suspect has been taken to hospital with severe injuries being described as self-inflicted. A spokesperson said the hospital was temporarily locked down but has since reopened. Armed police were deployed to the scene, but the incident not being treated as terror-related. More on all those stories, head to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And the market's looking like this today. The pound will buy you $1.2737 and €1.1629 euros. The price of gold, £1,517.88 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,559 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Now to the report that Rishi Sunak is heading for a cabinet row over a new border deal that would see us giving the EU money. Sunak and Suella Braverman are said to want to push through a deal with the EU that would mean that they work with Frontex, which is the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. But some ministers have pointed out the deal would cost the UK money. And they say that it wouldn't do much to stop the small boats crisis in the Channel. I'm sorry, but this would be absolutely par for the course, wouldn't it? We have a solution right in front of us. That solution involves turning boats back and employing enough Home Office staff to process the existing applications before we put people on a plane and send them somewhere else. But instead, we're going to open this country's wallet in the middle of a cost of living crisis and just spray it all over Europe. Henry Bolton joins me now, who is an international security and border control expert. Henry, so it looks like we're going to give the European Union money to not control our borders. What's going on?
Well, Patrick, I don't know what's going on. I mean, Frontex, for those people who aren't aware, is the European Union agency that coordinates border controls on the external borders of the European Union. It is actually a very professional and effective organisation as much as it can be, because, of course, there's a split jurisdiction. So if you're on the Italian border and with the Mediterranean, for example, you've got the Italian jurisdiction and then you've got Frontex there as well. So Frontex it really works as a coordination effort, really, provides intelligence across the European Union. That's what it does. I was good friends with the late Ilkka Laitinen, who was the executive director of the organisation. But what I have absolutely no difficulty with cooperation with Frontex. But what I'm confused about is why we would pay Frontex for the privilege. You know, of course, Frontex has a budget. Frontex costs money to run. But, you know, we don't pay if we coordinate or cooperate with, let's say, the Icelandic authorities or the Canadian authorities on something. We don't pay them for the privilege. It's an agreement. It's a mutual cooperation thing. What I suspect is behind this, Patrick, is because borders come under something called the Common Security and Defence Policy of the European Union. And I know from my personal discussions with the Foreign Office a few years ago, about 6 years ago, around all the Brexit discussions, that the civil service there was passionately of the view that we should stay as integrated as possible with the European architecture for common security and defence policy, subordinating ourselves effectively to their decision-making and all their structures. Now, that, I believe, is what's behind this. Because if you're going to integrate to that extent, to actually be a part of it, you need to pay into their budget, because you're actually part of it. You're not just coordinating with it. That is what I suspect this is about, and that is what would be behind the cabinet split.
I think it's going to be used, Henry. I think it's going to be used in a few years' time as another example about why we might as well just rejoin the European Union. People should bear in mind when it comes to rejoining the European Union or on Frontex as well. Yeah, go on, why not?
Very quickly, it is joining part of the European Union. If in fact what is happening is that we are going to integrate ourselves into the architecture of Frontex, and that would be the only reason we would pay money, unless it's a bribe or blackmail of some sort by the European Union, then we are entering as an intrinsic element or part of the European Union's architecture. It's not something for the future. It would happen as part of it. That's what this is.
We would be paying money to re-enter a group of nations that has open borders in the vain hope that that would help us protect our border, which is also already supposed to be protected not just by our own border force, but by the French, who we are paying £500 million. It is madness.
The civil service will be arguing, I have no doubt, or parts of the civil service will be arguing, that that is the way that we can influence European Union external border policy. Well, I've got a message for them and for Rishi Sunak as a chief planner for European Common Security and Defence Policy for 3 years, between 2013 and 16. I can tell you, absolutely unambiguously, that you will not have influence over it.
Yeah, and you're pretty cut and dry on that. And again, the answer appears to be staring us right in the face. We are spending, or potentially going to spend, more taxpayers' money on rejoining the European Union through the back door. What was one of the main reasons people voted for Brexit? To control our borders. And now the best that this country's leaders have got to offer, after taking no competitive advantage from Brexit whatsoever, is to try to pay the European Union money to help us control our borders. It's a capitulation. It's ridiculous.
It's a capitulation based on absolute incompetence in government and the civil service. And all political parties would be the same, I believe. There is no grasp in government, in the civil service, or in any of the serious political parties, or any party, that I can see, a real grasp of strategic national and international planning or decision-making. It's ad hoc, incoherent, and that is why the civil service are going to be, their proposition will be attractive to Rishi Sunak, because, you know, it is the alternative. If you can't develop a strategy, you might as well join somebody else's.
Yeah, Henry, thank you very much. As ever, Henry Bolton there, international security and border control expert. Right, now, this is a good one to finish on. Is the typical Christian stance towards transgender issues seen as too aggressive? That is according to what a senior figure in the church thinks. You know who thinks similarly to some fundamentalist Christians about the whole trans and gender issue? A lot of members of the Muslim community as well. What is going to happen when the trans lobby meets the British Muslim community? Well, let's find out, because I'm going to talk to somebody who is indeed of the British Muslim community very, very shortly. I am sick and tired of Christians being given an absolute kicking. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
A reminder that in just a few minutes' time we will be going live to a news conference with the US Coast Guard on that search of the missing submersible, and also a reminder that apparently GB News understands from a source that they have received SOS signals in Morse code being tapped from somewhere near the Titanic, where that submersible is believed to be. We have shots anyway of the harbour in Newfoundland, which we'll take you to, so there you go. So a press conference is going to take place just around that area there anyway. We will take that to you live on this show very, very shortly. But before we go to that, to acclaim that the Christian approach to transgender issues is aggressive. I think Christians are being bullied here, just people who have their religious views. And by the way, when I'm talking about Christians, I'm talking not just about people who go to church every single Sunday, people, the millions of people who loosely associate as being Christian, OK, who just think that there are 2 genders and there aren't 100, there aren't 2 spirit penguins and all of this nonsense, and that 9-year-olds shouldn't be taught that they can be a cat, right? All of these people, they're being demonised. They're being told that they are fundamentalist bigots. In many cases, they're being taken to court, they're losing their jobs, they're being demonised online. Anyway, that's certainly one of the views, anyway, that's been coming out of the Church of England at the moment. after assistant teacher Christy Higgs won an appeal against her sacking after expressing views on trans books in primary school. She won. Others don't, by the way. Others don't. And increasingly, the Christian view is being seen as aggressive. But it got me thinking. Don't a lot of members of the Muslim community think exactly the same way as more fundamentalist Christians? Were they seen as aggressive? Does the trans lobby go after them? I don't really think that they do massively, do they? And I wonder why not. Joining me now is political commentator Bushra Sheikh. Bushra, thank you very much. It's great to catch up with you. It's great to have you on the show. Much appreciated. And we've spoken about a similar topic before, but I wanted to highlight it again. Christians, I think, are a very easy target because they tend to be a little bit softer, a little bit squishier, and maybe a little bit more malleable in their views. What happens when the trans lobby really meets the British Muslim community?
Patrick, you know, I don't have to tell you this. You know that when it comes to Muslims and the whole trans movement and the LGBT movement in general, we are incredibly staunch about where we are and what positions we hold. This isn't something new that that communities and society is seeing with Muslims. We have been incredibly consistent with the positions that we hold for the last 10 plus years. So we have almost created a culture where other people already understand where we sit. And I think this is the issue within the kind of Christian community. And because it is softer, perhaps people have confused with the Christians being slightly softer. So now that the ones that were coming forward and saying that we don't like this, it's, you know, they are now receiving pushback for it.
You can guarantee that if a teacher, a Muslim teacher, had lost their job because they'd looked at a 9-year-old and said, I am not going to call you by your preferred pronouns, my religious beliefs are that I believe in two genders, and they'd lost their job as a result of that, there would have been protests and there would have been demonstrations. I'm sure of it. And you don't get that for, you know, poor Mrs Higgins at the C of E primary school down the road. She's out on her own. I mean, is this actually genuinely an area where some of the Christian community could arguably learn a bit from the Muslim community?
Totally, and you've actually said it in such a wonderful way. I'm very happy that that particular teacher that you were talking about won her appeal. Like you said, there are many cases where they won't win. The thing is, essentially, we all come from the root of the Abrahamic faiths, and we do believe in a lot of the same things. So, you know, and now we're also seeing that many of the Christian members and the Muslim members are coming together because they are uniting on this. As far as we're concerned, when it comes to content which is not age appropriate in schools, if we are looking at the trans movement and how that's indoctrinating or infiltrating young, impressionable children, everybody should be standing against that, regardless of whether you're Muslim or you're Christian. But I certainly believe that many softer Christians can learn from us with this.
Just forgive me for asking this, I'm going to be quite blunt about it. Do you feel that when it comes to this sometimes, that there is an element of protection maybe afforded to certain more forthright elements of the British Muslim community than there is from, you know, that middle-aged evangelical Christian lady who, you know, doesn't have too many people going into bat for it? Do you think that there can be... Is it a bit of fear, maybe, of some consequences? I don't know. What do you make of that?
Honestly, I believe it's because Muslims have been so consistent with their voice when it comes to the trans movement, when it comes to this. We've been talking about this, Patrick, for years, and I think I tweeted about it as well to say that we were already concerned about this 10 years ago. So it's the consistency of what we've been talking about. And even I have seen that Christians have moved the goalposts for themselves. So, you know, actually, which I'm very proud of, because I've always believed that that is what they think. But now people are standing up for it. And I think it's just a moment of time. So much time has elapsed that people already understand where Muslims sit. And I think it's just a matter of time before more Christians come out. And when they do, people are going to have to accept that these are their views as well.
Yeah, you're going to ironically end up with a load of Christians coming out of the closet, I think, when this thing kind of starts to affect their kids, if you'll excuse my turn of phrase. But I think this is an area where people just with general religious beliefs need to actually stand together. Because I think that what we are seeing in certain cases is anti-Christian discrimination in the workplace. And because a lot of that is white, because a lot of that is maybe middle class, it all gets brushed aside because we're seen maybe as being, you know, higher up the social strata and therefore above any kind of prejudice. And so it gets swept away. I seriously think that the case for racial discrimination or religious discrimination, had exactly the same thing happened to a couple of Muslim teachers, as has happened to some Christian teachers, would have been made loud and clear in a court of law and very, very vocally. Do you think that maybe religious people with religious views when it comes to gender need to stand together and start saying, look, we're not against what you're doing in terms of, you know, you can do it in your own home or whatever, do not force it on my children, because I do have a religious view and I need to be respected?
Totally, Patrick. I'm just going to say things bluntly, and you know what I'm like. When it comes to religious leaders, whether it's the Muslim leaders or whether it's the Christian leaders, I know that we have more Muslim leaders that support this. You see, they stand up for it. And I feel like within the Christian climate, you need to start questioning your leaders, and they need to understand and think about where they sit, because at the end of the day, when it comes to religion, if your leaders are not pushing the same voice, you are going to find that challenge. So if your leaders are saying, no, we're going to accept this is correct, then the pushback is going to happen. And essentially any rules, any laws, any cohesion is going to always come from your leaders. So Christians need to speak to their church leaders, the people that are in charge.
What are you going to do when the inevitable happens? And I hate to say this, I don't think it should be happening, but it will happen, which is when elements of the trans lobby or the LGBTQ plus lobby decide that they want to call people with fundamentalist Muslim beliefs, Islamic beliefs, bigots who are out of touch and who are homophobic transphobes. Are you just going to go, I don't care?
Totally. They do that already, Patrick. This is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's happening in front of our eyes now. I've been called a bit.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little...
Want that. So this is about people standing the line, holding the line and staying firm and expecting that you will be called names when you do not conform.
OK, look, Bushra, thank you very, very much. And I do, seriously, I'm very glad to have had this conversation because, you know, I think this issue is not going away. And I really do think that this is an area where maybe some elements of the Christian community can seriously have a look at the way that some elements of the Muslim community are handling this and think, well, why don't we just do the same? Why don't we just do the same thing? Bushra, thank you very much. Bushra Sheikh there, political commentator, friend of the show, of course. Get your views coming in on all of this. GBviews at gbnews.com. I'm glad that we've been able to kind of do a bit of a number on that story. Very shortly, we are going to go live to the news conference that's taking place or will take place in relation to this missing submersible. Michelle Dewberry joins me in the studio right now for Jubes & Co. Michelle.
Yeah, I've got all my fingers, toes, everything crossed again. We broke that of, the press conference at 6 o'clock yesterday. I was hoping, actually, it was going to be updating, saying that they'd found this vessel, they'd rescued it, but no, it was just basically saying they still didn't really know what was what. At the 6 o'clock last night, they were telling us that there was 41 hours worth of oxygen, about 40 hours or so. So, fast forward 24 hours later, you've got 17 hours left now. I imagine that they're going to be updating us at 6 o'clock with. And I just hope that we're going to have some positive news.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, this idea that there's been this tapping in Morse code SOS is a really positive sign.
Yeah.
This, by the way, what you're looking at on your screens right now is where this press conference is going to take place. We'll go live to that in a matter of moments. But what infuriates me is that from what we can gather, there is a company based in Jersey at the moment with equipment that they say is able to try to get to this submersible. And as we understand it, the US government is blocking it.
Well, so you're talking about Magellan.
Yeah.
That is their company. We're trying to get hold of them, actually. They're not speaking to the media. They have issued a statement on their website, which I've got in front of me as it happens. Yeah. They're saying they are, yes, they've offered their support. They are ready to go and all the rest of it as and when. They don't say that that support has been rejected or not. They just say that they're ready to support. We're fully mobilised to help, and it doesn't wish to comment on media reports that hasn't been accepted. Of course, there's a French ship en route as well that can do the depths, because it's all about the depth, Patrick. It's about having the ability to reach the depths that you need. And there's very few people, places, things that can do that.
I think that the psychology of the kind of person who even wants to undertake this kind of expedition, it's no surprise to me that the people who can afford to do it are billionaire risk takers. And I had some people on earlier on who were saying that if this submarine comes back up, they would be willing to get on it and go down to the Titanic. Again, there's a certain kind of psychology of...
Well, I've got a psychologist, actually, joining me off the back of this press conference as well, a former Navy officer and an operational psychologist that's been involved with kind of naval operations, rescue operations and all the rest of it. So I'm going to be asking him about the psychology. But, you know, wreck diving and stuff like that, it is fascinating. It really is fascinating. And I understand why these guys have taken part in that operation. It's kind of, I would say, once in a lifetime, but one of the people on board, they kind of know him as Mr. Titanic.
Yeah.
He's done this this kind of expedition multiple times.
Look, I can see somebody behind that plinth now, and so I think that we might, in just a second, go to this. We will take this press conference right now.
Discuss any updates regarding the search and rescue case for the submersible Titan that's located approximately 900 nautical miles offshore in the vicinity of the wreck of the Titanic. Today we will have speaking Captain Frederick, response coordinator of the 1st Coast Guard District. He'll be giving a brief statement followed by about 10 minutes for questions and answers. Thank you so much again. Let me please introduce Captain Frederick.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Captain Jamie Frederick with the 1st Coast Guard District, and I'll provide an update on our ongoing search efforts for the Titan submarine. Behind me, or beside me, I should say, you'll see several subject matter experts from the Unified Command who will introduce themselves momentarily. These individuals represent only a small fraction of the many dedicated professionals working around the clock on this complex response effort. We understand this is an extremely difficult time for the families of the missing crew members aboard the Titan, and our thoughts go out to them and the crew. The Unified Command team is working tirelessly to bring all available assets and expertise to bear as quickly as possible in response to this complex operation. And we remain in close contact with the family members and the crew to ensure they are fully aware of our current and future search efforts. Additionally, we have been in close contact with the British and French Consulates General to ensure that they are fully appraised of our efforts, and we are ensuring that their concerns are being addressed. We're incredibly grateful for the full spectrum of international assistance that has been provided, including an expert submariner from the Royal Navy, who's here with us serving aboard as a critical member of our team. Additionally, a team of highly trained French ROV operators departed St. John's last night are en route to aid the search. Moreover, our Canadian partners have been providing critical leadership and significant response capabilities since the beginning of our efforts. Again, this is an incredibly complex search operation requiring both surface and subsurface elements, and our unified approach is critical. The location of the search, 900 miles east of Cape Cod and 400 miles southeast of St. John's, makes it exceptionally difficult to mobilize large amounts of equipment quickly. In spite of those challenges, we've been able to provide continuous air and surface search assets, as well as additional ROV capability to search below the surface. We currently have 5 surface assets searching for the Titan, and we expect 10 total surface assets to search in the next 24 to 48 hours. There are 2 ROVs actively searching, and several more are en route and will arrive by tomorrow morning. We've received incredible support with aviation assets from our Coast Guard Air Station in Elizabeth City, the Air National Guard, and Canadian Armed Forces. Today there are 2 back-to-back P3 flights. One is ongoing now as I speak, totaling 14 hours of continuous on-scene coverage, and 2 C-130 flights, also one ongoing now, throughout the day and into the evening. Yesterday, a Canadian P3 detected underwater noises in the search area. As a result, ROV operations were relocated in an attempt to explore the origin of the noises. Although the ROV searches have yielded negative results, they continue. Additionally, the data from the P3 aircraft has been shared with our U.S. Navy experts for further analysis, which will be considered in future search plans. The surface search is now approximately 2 times the size of Connecticut, and the subsurface search is up to 2.5 miles deep, exponentially expanding the size of the search area. We also have to factor in the ever-changing weather conditions, currents, and sea states that expand the search area every hour. There's an enormous complexity associated with this case due to the location being so far offshore, and the coordination between multiple agencies and nations. We greatly appreciate the outpouring of support and offers to provide additional equipment. The Unified Command continues to prioritize assets and resources in order to provide the best capability in the most timely manner. This includes weighing multiple factors to identify the most effective resources available to the response operation, with careful consideration to timeliness of equipment arriving on scene, usefulness and ability to deliver assets to the search area. Over the past 48 hours, we have, through incredible unity of effort, mobilized and implemented a tremendous amount of expertise and response capability. In addition to the ships and aircraft previously mentioned, we've dispatched 2 subject matter experts from U.S. Navy NAVSEA Subsalv, who will serve as search coordinators on scene for underwater search operations. So I've been stressing unity of effort a lot in this statement, and that's because it is absolutely critical to this complex operation. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with the crew of the Titan and their loved ones. We will continue to work as hard and as quickly as possible in an effort to locate them. I will take a few questions, but before I do that, I do want I'm going to have each of the members of the team here just introduce themselves, and then I'll go ahead and take some questions.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Hankins. I'm the Director for Salvage Operations with the U.S. Navy's Supervisor of Salvage.
Hello, I'm Carl Hartsfield from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute.
Good afternoon. I'm Lieutenant Commander Rich Cantharia. I'm an exchange officer currently serving on the staff of Commander Submarines Atlantic at Norfolk, Virginia.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Commander Christy Butler, working closely with Captain Frederick from RCC Boston, Search and Rescue Mission Coordinator. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Can you tell us about the noises that were heard? Just give us some more detail and just follow up on what you've gathered so far based on those noises. Should that give the families and the others who care for these people, should that give them some reason to hope?
So a couple things. One, I think when you're in the middle of a search and rescue case, you always have hope. That's why we're doing what we do. With respect to the noises specifically, we don't know what they are, to be frank with you. The P3 detected noises. That's why they're up there. That's why they're doing what they're doing. That's why they put sonar buoys in the water. The good news is, what I can tell you is we're searching in the area where the noises were detected, and we'll continue to do so. And we hope that when we're able to get additional ROVs, which will be there in the morning, the intent will be to continue to search in those areas where the noises were detected, and if they're continuing to be detected, and then put additional ROVs down in the last known position where the search was originally taking place.
Captain, is it true that these noises were coming in regular 30-minute intervals as reported?
I hadn't heard 30-minute intervals. So here's what I can tell you. I am not a trained ear for underwater aquatics. That's why we have a team of experts that are analyzing that data. That data was sent immediately to the Navy last night, and it was analyzed overnight. They're still looking at it, but I can tell you that it's inconclusive. But again, I think the important piece is we're searching in the area where the noises were detected.
Captain, can you talk about a timeline? Can you talk about what timeline you're working on in conjunction with the teams that are there?
It's a timeline in what respect?
How much oxygen they have left on?
Oh, okay. Well, in terms of, so we talked about the oxygen number. I think you're all tracking the oxygen number. I think there's an important point with that, though. The oxygen, that's just one piece of data, right? There are a lot of pieces of data that we need to consider. And, you know, we're continuously looking at that, and we'll continuously, do that throughout the search. But that's not the only thing that's important, right? And right now, our efforts are solely focused on the search. That certainly is a dialogue that's happening. But we're focused on searching at this point.
This is a recovery or a rescue?
Oh, this is a search and rescue mission, 100%. We are smack dab in the middle of search and rescue, and we'll continue to put every available asset that we have in an effort to find the Titan and the crew members.
Captain, can you describe those ROVs, and can you confirm that some sort of rectangular object has been spotted? There was some sort of report about that.
So a couple things. So the ROVs, each ROV brings different capability. The ROVs that are diving today, Paul, what's the depth on the
4,000 meters.
4,000 meters. And some additional ROVs that'll be arriving tomorrow have additional depth capability. With respect to an object, so yesterday one of the aircraft did see an object. I will tell you this, in search and rescue missions, when aircraft are flying continuously, there is stuff out in the ocean that is floating. We went back, we looked at it, it wasn't, we didn't determine it to be debris. We don't think it correlates with the case, and it is not uncommon at all during an active search to see things, and then we go and look at them. So.
Just from BBC News, when were these noises first heard? How long did they persist for? And if I could also ask, do you have any information in terms of food and water that men might have on board the sub?
Yeah, so so several P3 flights have heard noises as yesterday, and we put assets there. We relocated assets immediately. With respect to food and water, it's my understanding there are some limited rations. I can't tell you exactly how much they have aboard, but they do have some limited rations aboard the vessel.
Speaking to the families, how much hope can you give them after hearing those noises?
Listen, I think you need to be careful. We need to have hope, right? But I can't tell you what the noises are. But what I can tell you is, and I think this is the most important point, we're searching where the noises are, and that's all we can do at this point.
Is that your best clue right now about the status of the submersible or those noises? And are the noises continuing now as they stop?
So I just wanted to, so it was my understanding that the P3 had heard some noises today as well. But so I do want to take just an opportunity to invite Carl to the podium just to talk a little bit about, he has a little bit more expertise in underwater acoustics, and maybe just to speak to that in general, because again, you know, there are noises below the surface of the ocean, so I'll just turn it to Carl.
Carl, can you spell your name?
Yes, CarlHartsfield. So again, Carl Hartsfield from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. So the ocean is a very complex place. Obviously, human sounds, nature sounds, and it's very difficult to discern what the source of those noises are at times, but I can tell you that this team has multiple sensors. They're in the area. They're sending data back expeditiously to the best in the world people to analyze that data, and then they're feeding the results of that analysis back to the unified team, and they're making decisions. So Woods Hole is here in an advisory role, but by our expertise, what I see is a very tight operational loop that's making decisions based on data, and nothing is ruled out.
Considering,
He said he heard the noises this morning. Are they still continuing on a regular basis?
There have been multiple reports of noises, and every one of those noises is being analyzed, tracked, looked for patterns, and reported upon.
Considering how many days passed?
Can you describe what the noise sounds like that they're hearing?
Well, you know, the noises, again, very complex in the ocean. You have to be an acoustic analysis, and you have to have context. They're trying to put all the pieces together. The noises have been described as banging noises. But again, they have to put the whole picture together in context, and they have to eliminate potential man-made sources other than the Titan.
Considering how many days passed?
Is it possible a ship in the ocean or even some mammals out there could mimic that kind of sound?
So I can tell you from my experience with acoustics that there are sounds by biologics that sound man-made to the untrained ear, but I can assure you that the people listening to these tapes are trained. There are a lot of vessels in the area, and they each make noise, right? So all of that has to be eliminated, and it's analysis over time. Plus, as the captain said, the team is searching in the right area. So if you continue to do the analysis, look for different patterns, and search in the right area, you're doing the best you possibly can do with the best people on the case.
Considering how many days passed?
Excuse me. A deep ocean salvage system flyway that was sent there to the location. Can you tell if it's on site yet, and how it operates, and how long it would take to rescue at depth with that take?
Which system is he speaking about? You know the system? What's the system that you're talking about?
It's called flyway deep ocean salvage system.
That's just a hydraulic a crane.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. So that's a piece of equipment. It's a crane piece of equipment. There are a lot of pieces of equipment flowing in through St. John's right now. One thing I did want to mention, I think it's important. Some of the ROV capability that's arriving soon is really great, incredible capability. One thing I want to point out is that French team that's coming in to serve aboard with their equipment aboard a French ship. They bring some state-of-the-art equipment, and so once they get on, we're going to have more assets down to look, and we'll continue to put them where we think the best location is.
Considering how many days passed, are you still optimistic that you're gonna find them both?
So how many days? Did you ask how many days?
Considering how many days passed?
Well, so we have to remain optimistic and hopeful when you're in a search and rescue case. So we're right in the middle of the search and rescue case. So I don't want to get into a discussion about when that would end with respect to this case. What I will tell you, though, I'm happy to explain to you kind of how that process were to work. The Coast Guard prosecutes search and rescue cases on a daily basis, and sometimes we don't find what we're looking for, and you have to carefully consider all of the factors, and there are a lot of factors you consider. And then after you consider all of those factors, sometimes you're in a position where you have to make a tough decision. We're not there yet, but if we continue to search, potentially we could be at that point. But again, we're not there yet, and that's a discussion that we will have with the family long before I'm going to discuss that here publicly.
Given this was an uncertified...
Yeah, so I can't put a number on the I'm not going to put a percent. I don't have a percentage number. What I would tell you is that is just one data point, and there are more data points than that we have to look at. So right now we continue to search, and we'll have that later.
Given this...
Sure. So the report. So the noises were heard by a Canadian P3, and that was this morning and some yesterday. I don't know specifically or they're 30-minute intervals, but again, I really think the important point to that is we're in the air, we're searching there. We moved assets and we're searching there, and we'll continue to do so.
Could you just
Go ahead.
And I don't know if you mentioned this yet, but is the vessel itself, what do you likelihood that it's actually still operable at this time, the vessel itself?
Yeah, I don't. So listen, whether it's operable or whether it's sitting on the ocean floor, whether it's in the sea column, whether it's in the surface, it's all speculation, and we're just not in the business of speculation. We're in the business of searching, and we're putting everything we can with the data we have to search for the vessel. And I think we'll take one more question. Go ahead, sir.
Just want to get a bit more about the role of the Navy and the assistance being provided, as well as the equipment that is being deployed.
Yeah, so we asked for some additional subsurface support, and we got that through the Navy, through a liaison officer. He's just one of many team members, and we're greatly appreciative of the British government and all the support they've given us.
Do we expect a daily update now on this?
So I think the plan will be to do a daily like this. I'm not going to lock into that right now, but we'll keep you informed, and certainly if there's any major developments, we'll let you know. Thank you very much.
Could someone please